Checking. 1, 2. Check, check. I think we're okay.
I hope so.
All right. So for 30andnerdy.com, I'm Matt.
I'm Scott.
And you're listening to our Metal Gear Solid 5 podcast. It's probably going to end up being a podcast extravaganza.
Really good chance of that. We tend to get out of control.
Yeah. And if you're listening to us now, there's a good chance you haven't listened to us in a really, really long time. So thanks for joining us again. We're glad to be back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Metal Gear Solid 5, this game's been out for a little over 2 weeks now, and for a little over 2 weeks now, it absolutely consumed all of my time that wasn't spent, working and taking care of life things and whatnot.
Yeah, sleeping.
But I forget, you sent me an email saying, like, hey, we should do a podcast about this. You've been playing this game that the world at this point seems to be talking about and, for the most part, raving about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it came to my attention largely because of you, because you were posting incessantly about it on either Facebook or Twitter, and so I knew you. Obviously, I knew you were excited for the game, and then the second the game came out, radio silence from you, and I knew that had to be a good thing, because if you didn't like the game, you would have been complaining about it, vocally online. Or I would have heard from you in some capacity, I think. And so when about 2 weeks went by and I didn't hear from you, I thought, there's got to be something going on with this game. We should probably talk about it.
And then you received an email from me saying, yes, I just got done putting 90 hours into it.
Yeah, so in the span of about 2 weeks, you put 90 hours into Metal Gear Solid 5. I definitely want to know your reactions, your full reaction to the game, and it's clear that if you put 90 hours into a game, you're enjoying it. But one thing, if you just want to say one thing before we get into the rest of the podcast, just to sort of, bait the appetite of our listeners, what would you say right now before we get into it?
Well, before we get into me getting into it and baiting them, okay, because whenever you talk about Metal Gear Solid 5, I feel like you've got those people who are already on board with either the game or the series. Okay, basically you've got people who have played Metal Gear Solid 5 to completion, and there's nothing left for us to spoil for them. And then you've got people who have either just begun playing it or aren't sure if they're going to dive into it, and we can spoil the world for them. And so I want to know, we should have probably gone over this ahead of time. Are we going to do like a full-on spoiler cast, or do you want me to tiptoe around sensitive content in the game?
I prefer to have a conversation where we just get into everything.
Okay.
So I guess we should, if you're willing to, we should do the spoiler alerts.
Let's do a spoiler cast, especially if you don't think that it's something that you're going to ever invest in.
I'm also not just usually concerned about spoilers.
Oh, okay. Well, there's some big stuff in this game. There's some crazy stuff, but I would love to talk about it all.
All right, well, let's do it then.
Okay, so to bait the audience, this is going to be a spoiler cast, as it turns out. If you love action games, if you love stealth games, or if you've ever loved a Metal Gear Solid game, off the bat, I highly recommend it. So if you're wondering whether or not you should play this game, the answer off the top of my head is yes, definitely. But this is going to be a spoiler cast, so if you haven't done that yet and you don't want things spoiled for you, just go buy it, go play it, like get your hands on this. Yeah, because for all the things about this game that could potentially, piss you off at some point in the game, and oh my god, I can't wait to get into it and talk about it. There is way more good in this game than there is bad.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll go into an overview of the history of the series if you want.
Yeah, sure. It's really easy to think of Metal Gear as a series that began on the PlayStation, because that's certainly when its popularity exploded, and that's the current numbering system that we're working off of. But before that, back in 1987, there was Metal Gear Solid, or MSX, I guess, that was released.
Metal Gear 1 for the MSX, which was actually, I don't know if I don't know if
Holy
it was a
crap, I don't
console
know.
platform or like a PC-based platform, but it was like a Japanese-only system, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't even know about that one.
Yeah.
Cool. So it was released on the MSX in '87, and then on the NES. Oh, I see now. On the NES in '88.
Yes.
It saw a unofficial sequel in 1990 called Snake's Revenge.
Yeah, Metal Gear 2: Snake's Revenge.
Yeah. Um, and then another Metal Gear 2 in '90 on the MSX, or is that the same game?
No, so here's what happened with that. And I learned this from actually listening to a bunch of non-spoilery Metal Gear podcasts in the weeks while
Oh,
I
those
had been
polite.
playing the game, right? And so I guess that like obviously, like you said out here in '87, here in America we got Metal Gear 1, and then the way I heard it was people received this other game. Like this other game just ended up on store shelves called Metal Gear 2: Snake's Revenge. And I guess for people who loved the first game, what they noticed about this Snake's Revenge is that immediately was that it was really crappy. It was just like a bad game. And that people were, just like asking themselves, like, what happened? How did this fall apart? Et cetera, et cetera. And what it turned out was that it was just, like some non-official, alternatively developed game that was not written or made or by Hideo Kojima, the series creator whatsoever.
Just sort of slapped with the Metal Gear name.
Yes, exactly. Same character.
Sort of like when Mario 2 actually started out as a different game, and then they decided to warp it into a Mario game.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Although Mario 2 is actually a good game, though. But
yeah, far more successful.
Yeah, I digress. I heard, I forget if it was Giant Bombcast or maybe it was one of the IGN ones I was listening to. They said that supposedly when Snake's Revenge came out, that Kojima didn't. He was like, "What? Like, how did Metal Gear 2 come out? Like, I'm working on Metal Gear 2. Like."
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and so then. I believe it wasn't until they released one of those like legacy collections or like one of the collections that they more recently in the past few years released on like a PlayStation 3 out here or whatever other consoles it came onto where you could play those older games that were only released in Japan for the first time out here that like we really got our hands on it.
Hmm.
Yeah, because like Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, the official one that Kojima did make and put out on the MSX in Japan only in 1990 was the official sequel where he he evolved the systems that were present in the first game that he created. The graphics are better, the gameplay was better, the story is actually canon, things actually made sense, and it was a good game, unlike Snake's Revenge.
It is worth noting that because these games were on the NES, they're very different graphically. Of course, it was even though the Metal Gear that eventually came out on the PlayStation in '98 was top down, it had the 3D aspect to it, whereas, of course, the NES MXX games were 2D and probably more action based. I never played them. Did you ever play these?
No, I never did. They were also top down though, like so that. The perspective that they went with on the PlayStation version in 1998 was actually the next one that would come out after Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake in 1990. 8 years later, crazy.
Huge jump in technology between the two.
Yeah, huge jump in technology. But I think it's so cool if you look at the screenshots of the games side by side, you see where the idea for that camera perspective, in the 1998 Metal Gear Solid 1 came from. Like it was definitely an evolution of that idea that Kojima had so long ago. As far as like action versus stealth and stuff like that, I think for the most part, like also leading up to Metal Gear Solid 5's launch, I did have the opportunity to watch some live streams on Twitch of Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 and stuff like that. And there's still like the stealth mechanics are there. It's all just very, I don't know, rudimentary is a good word. Like you're trying not to be seeing the enemies get the exclamation marks over their heads when you're spotted, and they kind of just follow you around until you take them out. And I don't know if there is a system where you can break line of sight with them, or like how you hide after you're seen in the older games. I'm not sure if you just have to punch them or shoot them to take them out. But it's the same thing where you're sneaking your way around environments. You have boss battles. except it's all very NES era in that, you know, it was super limited with what he could do with it at the time. But some of the things that were in play back then, besides, like I said, some of the certain gameplay elements, was the whole like the codec system where you have like two characters and you have you know, like their portraits, and they're talking to each other by, you know, having text go back and forth on the screen and whatnot. And so even back in those early days, Kojima was you know, showing his interest in this more story-driven, I guess, like a, you know, cinematic you know, presentation. You know, when you compare it to games like, you know, Mario and Double Dragon and, you know, stuff that was out at the time.
Interesting. Okay. So then we've got, you know, the low res games, 87, 88, for the first one, then 90 for the unofficial sequel, and then Hideo Kojima's actual sequel, Solid Snake, in 90. And then 8 years later, we get Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation. And this is the game that broke open the series. It was wildly popular. It incorporated a variety of new game mechanics, including a lot with the vibrating controller. I recall at one point there's a boss that it tries to intimidate you by telling you to put the controller on the ground, and then like he shakes it so hard that the controller starts bouncing around like crazy. At least that's a story that I remember Garrett telling me.
Yeah, so the infamous Psycho Mantis boss battle, he does all sorts of stuff. He'll yeah, if you've got the, I don't know if they called it the DualShock back then, but if you had the Rumble controller,
I think so.
Yeah, if they called it the dual, anyways, if you had the DualShock controller and you put it on a hard surface, you would make it vibrate. So yeah, like you said, it danced around. If you had other Konami games loaded onto your memory card, he would say things like, "Oh, I see you like playing Castlevania."
Oh, no way.
Like yeah. During this boss battle, Scott, other things happened too. He would make the screen go blank. Like he would make it look like you lost your video signal, and then the word Hideo would appear in the upper right-hand corner and like in green text. You know, like at the time, if people didn't know, it's like, you know, Hideo Kojima's first name. He would also, what else did he did in order to beat him? So what he's doing in this boss battle, maybe we should probably talk about this stuff later. Anyways, you got me on a roll. Is he like, you know, he's got like a psychic, psychokinesis abilities and stuff like that. And so you're fighting him in some sort of like a boardroom, and he's launching like chairs and objects that are on shelves, you know, like across the room at you, pictures and portraits and stuff like that. And you're trying to dodge him and you're trying to shoot him with your gun to take him out and stuff like that. But he always either dodges your bullets or blocks your attack and stuff like that. And what you need to do to defeat him is you need to unplug your controller from controller port 1 and plug it into controller port 2, because he's actually, quote unquote, reading your mind when you plug it into a, you know, when you're playing with it plugged into port 1, and when you plug into port 2, you can't read your mind anymore. And the way that you figure this out in the game without using like a strategy guide or anything like that is during the battle, if you go into your codec and you talk to, I believe it's Colonel Campbell. It's one of the people. I think it's the colonel that's guiding you through the mission. He'll actually let you know to do that.
Oh, okay.
The game did so many cool things.
So it's not just good guessing.
Yeah, it's not just good guessing. I think for me, it might have been one of those things where somebody on the school bus told me how to beat that battle. I was struggling with it. Scott, the game does this thing in one moment where I believe it's when you have to contact Meryl for the first time. And the colonel, I believe it's the colonel again, says that he can't remember Meryl's codec number, her codec frequency to reach her. He says, but if you look on the back of the game box, you should be able to find it. And on the back of the PlayStation 1 game box is a screenshot of Snake, of the codec screen of Snake talking to Meryl, and you can see her codec frequency on the screenshot, and that's how you figure out how to contact her.
That is so weird.
So
I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun, but yeah,
God,
like the game sort of steps out of itself and
it does. It breaks the fourth wall multiple times.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So and on top of doing that, I don't recall what the state of stealth games were at the time, but it felt revolutionary, or it felt very heavy in terms of stealth mechanics. Whereas we had and have always had a variety of games that are heavy on the action, and you know, something like even Ninja Gaiden back in the day. It's like, yeah, it's a quote unquote stealth game. You know, you just stick yourself to the wall, wait for the guard to pass, and hit him as he goes by.
Oh, yeah.
But Metal Gear Solid, more like Tenchu, was playing with the perceptions of the people that you were trying to sneak past or attack and take out, and you actually had to respond to them as though they were people in a world, as opposed to an autonomous bot roaming about.
That's a really good comparison. I forgot about Tenchu Stealth Assassin, but yeah, those are probably
played
like
so much Tenchu.
those are probably like the two premium like PS1 era like stealth games. Like, yeah, oh man.
Yeah, but unlike Tenchu, Metal Gear continued to be a venerable series, whereas Tenchu jumped the shark in the second game.
Oh, was it the second game? It didn't take long then, huh? Well, you know what?
It did not.
There's some people that'll. Oh, go on.
Well, I was gonna say, I remember knowing that I was in trouble playing Tenchu 2 when the first level starts you in the middle of a field in the middle of the day, and you're supposed to be a ninja. It's like, put me at night in a town. Yeah, it just feels like it completely missed the mark. Although there were cool things that you could do in Tenchu 2, the game had lost its mystique. And I don't think it ever recovered. I didn't even bother with 3, and I don't know what they did after that.
That's disappointing to hear.
Yeah, but Metal Gear continued after the wild success of Metal Gear 1 from '98. It hopped systems to, or hopped generations, I suppose I should say, to PlayStation 2 in 2001.
I want to pause you real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say that worth noting when we go through this list is we're talking about the Metal Gear games that are kind of like canon to like the whole Big Boss / Solid Snake saga, because Metal Gear Solid VR missions did come out on PlayStation 1. I didn't list it because it's not like, it's like it's a side game, So sorry, I just for listeners, so somebody isn't like, oh, they forgot VR missions. It's like, nah,
right, yeah.
Really. Just we're not going to talk about
here.
Yeah, like what was that one?
To try and list all the Resident Evil games, it's like we're not going to talk about all the in-between or half games or zero or like all the remakes.
Because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, we'll just stick to the spine, more or less.
Right. Okay, so sorry, go on. You said after Metal Gear Solid 2?
They put it on the Xbox eventually as well. And then Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes on the GameCube in 2004. Metal Gear Solid 3, PlayStation 2 again in 2004, so same year. Then Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops for the PSP in 2006. Then number 4 on the PlayStation 3 in 2008. Then Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker for the PSP in 2010. And then, just a couple of weeks ago, Metal Gear Solid 5 for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. I didn't know it was on PC. Interesting.
Yeah. I guess it's supposed to be the PC version actually got some love, with like some ultra settings and stuff like that. So it's one of those ports that it sounds like they put time into it, and that it does look better than the PS4 and Xbox One versions.
Oh, cool. Maybe I will check it out. I'm probably going to do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. PCs definitely have the graphical advantage, or should.
Worth noting.
So anyway.
Worth noting in that list that you just went through, Portable Ops on PSP, kind of like Snake's Revenge, was also not developed by Hideo Kojima. I don't know, but I do know that he has since come out to say that many of the storyline parts of that game are actually canon. I don't know if it was canon written by him or supervised by him. I could have sworn that at one point in history he said, no, it's not canon. And then 3 years later-ish, or whatever, a chunk of time went on, and then he said, like, oh, no, actually, some of that stuff did really happen. So the certain elements of the series' story has always been kind of messy. When I did a lot of research about the series kind of leading up to 5 in my own personal anticipation, the word retcon came up time and time again, and I had actually never heard of the word until reading about this series, and I was like, oh man, it was kind of disappointing to hear that there were so many points at which Kojima would say, like, no, that didn't happen, or yes, that really did happen, or he had come up with some like ridiculous reason for how something happened. Like, he's just like pulling crap out of his, out of his ass, I guess you could say, to certain story elements in the series, like piece together and stuff like that. And you know what? Despite all of that stuff, it's still there's no other game series like it.
Yeah.
Really,
You know, it's funny, as we were, you know, because I lived through a good majority of the series, well aware of video gaming. As the series was progressing, I had so many friends who were playing it that would be discussing the ins and outs of the plot and trying to figure out what was going on. And it sounded like such a mess that it was actually off-putting to me. Aside from, I was like, I play plenty of games that don't have a coherent plot, but it sounds like the Metal Gear series has been trying to work with this large arc. And like you said, there's been so much retconning or questionable entries that, like the Star Wars universe, nobody is really certain what is canon and what isn't. And I'm sure
that's a really good comparison. Wow.
I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, there's an official canon, blah, blah, blah. But like, there's just so much out there that it's got to be easy to forget which piece belongs where. But that said, what is the series about? What is the primary conflict that these games? I imagine the story rebooted in '98, or has the story been consistent since 1987?
No, it's been consistent since 1987.
Oh my God.
Okay, and
okay. So what is the primary conflict over the last almost 30 years?
All right, and here's where we're gonna kind of start going into some spoiler territory. Okay.
Do it.
Okay, so the game actually, okay, so this series actually starts out with Metal Gear Solid 3. You've got the character. That's like the first game in the timeline is Metal Gear Solid 3.
Okay, so the one on the PlayStation from 2004 is actually a prequel.
Wait, the one on PlayStation in 1998?
No, you said Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yes, Metal Gear Solid 3, which came out on PlayStation 2 in 2004.
Right.
As far as that game's storyline is concerned, that's where the series starts.
Okay. So chronologically speaking, it's the first. It is a prequel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's actually, you bring up a good point. Let me see if I can do this off the top of my head here. Okay. So storyline wise, in chronological order, you have Metal Gear Solid 3, Portable Ops, Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes / Phantom Pain. Then you have Metal Gear 1, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2, and when I say 1, I mean 1 / Twin Snakes. Right. And then you have Metal Gear Solid 4. That's the order that they go in. Okay.
Wow.
And so, okay, where do I even go? Okay, where do we?
And then, where does 5 fit in the chronology?
Oh, Metal Gear Solid 5. Like I said, it goes 3, Portable Ops, Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh wow. Okay.
So Metal Gear Solid 5 is the one that leads into Metal Gear 1 on the MSX/NES, and that came out in 1987.
So he's almost working backwards.
Yeah, but that's why this game was so special, was because for people who played Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 back on the MSX/NES back in those days, for people who were paying attention to the canon as far back as that, there were some really big, what looked like holes at the time and things that people weren't sure made sense, and just theories and conspiracy theories and things like that. And so Metal Gear Solid 5 is the first time that the series has really come full circle and just kind of completed itself.
Weird.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So like a brief overview of just kind of like the games. They're thematically they're about control. They're stories about soldiers going into war. It's about the state of nuclear power in the world, and just like it's always government control, conspiracies, just Oh my god, my earpiece fell out of my microphone. It's just like it's about that kind of stuff. And so Metal Gear Solid 3, I feel like I got to figure out how I'm going to say this first. This is going to take me a really, really freaking long time to go through all of this. And so to spare us the 2 hours it'll take me to go through this.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we break it down then?
Let me go like just the bare bone basics, right?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
So Metal Gear Solid 3, you've got a character called Naked Snake. Naked Snake is sent into, man, I don't even remember all the parts of the world that these games take place in. They take place in Africa, or I think he's sent into Russia. Not entirely sure. But okay, so essentially Metal Gear Solid 3, Naked Snake, eventually, because of things that happen, has to take out the boss. The boss is the greatest soldier who's ever lived. The boss is also a woman, which I think is incredible. She's trained special forces teams like all throughout her lives and stuff like that. He's sent to take out the boss because he's told that the boss defected to the Soviet Union and is like co-responsible for like detonating a nuke over there that America gets blamed for. And so he's got to go take out the boss because Russia has basically said that if you kill the boss who's responsible for detonating a nuke in Soviet Russia, we're not going to retaliate against you guys. We're not going to nuke the United States. What he finds out at the end of the game, when he's basically going to put the final bullet in the boss's head, is that she was actually faithful to the United States the whole time. She was like either a double or triple agent who actually just got caught up in like this whirlwind of a thing where she didn't know the nuke was going to go off and stuff like that. And so she basically agrees to let Naked Snake kill her in order to prevent nuclear war. So when Snake takes her out, he takes over her title. He takes over the title of boss, and they call him Big Boss from that point forward. Okay, so that's Metal Gear Solid 3. And there's so much more, like each of these games is like its own story. There's all sorts of crazy characters that you, like the cool thing about Metal Gear Solid 3, Scott, for like playing it for the first time, that's actually probably one of my least favorite ones, even though it has one of the most like amazing self-contained stories in the entire series. It's like anybody can play Metal Gear Solid 3 because it's the first one in the story and just be told like a really great sci-fi Cold War espionage tale, I just didn't like the gameplay in it. Where did I say we go from there? Okay, so yeah, then it's like, so after being tasked with like doing all that stuff and taking out his mentor, the boss, and taking over the title and stuff like that, and being saluted and congratulated by the government and stuff like that, Snake basically decides he doesn't want anything to do with the U.S. government. And so going into leading into portable ops, and then Peace Walker, you have Naked Snake / Big Boss. We'll call him Big Boss at this point because that's what he's known as. He starts up like his own military. It's called Militaire Sans Frontiers or something like that. Basically, stands for like a military without borders. And so he basically starts building his own private army. And in the process of, and at the end of Metal Gear Solid 3, like there's like a Metal Gear unit. Metal Gear in all the games is always like, it's usually like a bipedal walking robotic tank capable of like launching nuclear weapons anywhere, which is terrifying. Anyways, so in portable ops and then Peace Walker definitely like Snake starts building a private army, which gets the attention of like all the nations around the world and stuff like that. So basically, he makes allies and he makes a lot of enemies, and he makes enemies of the U.S. government and other governments and things like that. Peace Walker is about, in Peace Walker has the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 5, like the Fulton system, where it's like you can be going stealth out in the field, and you can find soldiers who you can see what like their stats and their attributes are. And, some guys are good at like combat, other guys are good at support units or like intel units. Some people are like good medics and stuff like that. And so when you're out in the field in this game, you essentially can strap these giant balloons to the enemy soldiers, and you can like suck them up into the air, and they come back into your base, and you're basically you're taking hostages, and you're convincing them to join your private army. But because of the the limited technology of the PSP back in the day, the whole base building thing, it was kind of like it was a system. It was like a system of graphs and numbers and charts and things like that you were sort of like micromanaging. The game was like half gameplay, that Metal Gear fans knew, and it was sort of like half giant spreadsheet, where you were building this base on paper. And some people liked that about it, and some people didn't like it. Like storyline wise, it's like Big Boss meets like the scientist, and it turns out that like I forget if it's the government or who the heck it was, but some people started building an AI system that had the original female boss's personality and all of her military knowledge. They built this AI system by going over all of the details of all of the missions she had ever been on in her life, all the things she had ever said. Basically, every little morsel of information they had on her, they used to build this AI system, and they wanted this AI system to basically be what controlled their next generation of nuclear-capable weapons, because they figured, like the original boss was like such an amazing person and such a good strategist and military leader and stuff like that, that like what better to, make the decisions in regards to like, nuclear warfare than this AI version of a legendary soldier. And so that's kind of like, I don't know, am I making sense of Peace Walker?
I'm only tentatively following anyway.
Okay. So
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Peace Walker's about Snake building his army. I'll move on.
Right. Okay.
This gets even crazier. Snake is Big Boss building his army, and then from Peace Walker you have Ground Zeroes. Ground Zeroes is about. It's really short. It's like you can beat this game, well, depending on how fast you do it. We'll say like an average, and anywhere between 5 minutes to an hour, depending on how long you want to go through the core mission in this game. And it's about Big Boss going on a mission to retrieve hostages who once worked with him at Outer Heaven, which is the base that he built in Peace Walker. He's going to retrieve these hostages because the people who took them hostage are not nice. And the people that were taken hostage, Paz, the female spy, and what was the other guy's name? Chico, just somebody who was at the Mother Base / Outer Heaven. Basically, these people know where Big Boss's base is, and all this information on him and stuff like that, and he's got to go extract them for his own good. In the process of extracting both of them, it turns out that Paz has a bomb that's been implanted inside her. So there's a crazy scene in the game, Scott, where like you rescue her and you're on the helicopter and you're headed back to your base, and your base is on fire and it's blowing up, and basically one thing leads to another, and this secret covert organization called XOF, which is like the opposite of Fox, which Fox is this one of the organizations in the game. Basically, they staged like a fake United Nations visit, and they take out everything that Big Boss spent all of the Peace Walker game building. And in the process, the bomb that was planted inside Paz goes off as she's jumping out of the helicopter trying to save Big Boss's life. And the bomb goes off, and the game pretty much ends. After you watch the explosion, like rip through the helicopter and take out both Big Boss and one other character and stuff like that. Oh my God. Trying to do each of these in like 3 minutes or so is like trying to explain the most complex plot to like your favorite deep, crazy films in 3 minutes. You know what I mean? But
Sure.
Instead of condensing 90 minutes into 3 minutes, it's condensing, like on average, 15 hours of story into 3 minutes. It's ridiculous. Anyways, so like I said, so we went over Ground Zeroes, Metal Gear Solid 5. We'll get on it a little bit. So Boss and Big Boss, right? They're the most incredible soldiers that have ever existed. And at some point, somebody takes his DNA. And I don't need to go into who or to why, but they take his DNA because at some point he's either going to die of old age or he's going to die in combat. And we'll say, well, to sum it up, we'll say the government, quote unquote, the government wants to have his DNA on file so that they can basically mess around with cloning him. He doesn't really know this, but he gets word of this later. And so there's a project that's created to try to create clones of Big Boss. Because, I mean, why wouldn't you just want clones of, like, the most, legendary soldier ever made? So the clones that are made are actually, one of them is Solid Snake from Metal Gear 1, Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, and then Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 4. Another clone that's made is Liquid Snake, who's in Metal Gear Solid 2 and kind of in some ways in Metal Gear Solid 4. And then there's also like a third clone that's made, Solidus Snake, the pure clone, who is only
most solid.
Yeah.
Or is it like a Latin solidus?
I don't know. You know what? Knowing this, we'll say it's a Latin. He's in Metal Gear Solid 2 as well, Scott. Okay. This is already getting out of control. So here's the thing, right? So basically, at some point in the game, so here, in Metal Gear 2, here's what we're going to do.
All right.
In Metal Gear 1, which came out in the MSX in 1987, Big Boss, who we've talked about, Big Boss sends his clone son soldier, Solid Snake, to go kill, quote unquote, himself, Big Boss, at the base that he's established, which is called Mother Base / Outer Heaven. Basically, the whole game, as I understand it, in Metal Gear 1, is like Solid Snake having radio communications with Big Boss, who works for the U.S. government at the time, and he's being sent to infiltrate this place called Outer Heaven so he can take out the guy who's in charge there. Well, it turns out the guy who's in charge there is himself, Big Boss, right? So doesn't make any sense until you play Metal Gear Solid 5, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Because in Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, that's a canon story about Solid Snake actually being sent, once again, by the U.S. government to go take out Big Boss. So you can imagine people who played these games are like, what? Why is he going to take out the guy that he killed in the first game? Why is the government sending him to take out the guy who he killed in the first game, who just so happened, like the guy he was told by the guy himself to take himself out in the first game, but now the U.S. government's saying, no, go take him out again. And like none of this made sense to anybody until Metal Gear Solid 5 came out, Scott. Because all right, so
a mere 25 years later.
Right. This is how crazy it is, right? And so then, all right, so Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation is still about this soldier, Solid Snake, who, I guess in the lore of this game, supposedly Solid Snake got the bad genes. Remember that movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito?
Who could forget?
Arnold Schwarzenegger got all the good genes, and DeVito got all the leftovers and stuff like that. Supposedly, Solid Snake is like the DeVito character in this whole series, with Solidus being the most perfect, Liquid being second best, even though he was lied to and told that he was the crummy parts. He really wasn't, and he was always his whole hang-up.
They're just trying to inspire him to be better.
And yes, right. And so it's kind of like this. The whole series is this weird underdog story for the second half of it. In Metal Gear Solid that came out on the original PlayStation, you have once again Solid Snake, who's clearly a tool at this point, being sent by the U.S. government. He's taken out of retirement by the U.S. government to go to Shadow Moses Island to stop a terrorist threat from launching nuclear weapons at the United States. The terrorist threat is a Foxhound. I think it's Foxhound unit. It's been forever since I played that game, or Twin Snakes. Led by Liquid Snake, Revolver Ocelot, who's in all these Metal Gear games. You first see a young Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid 3. He's in Metal Gear Solid 5, is even older. Basically, Liquid Snake is demanding the quote-unquote remains of Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid. So you see how, like, again, this stuff is still going full circle. He's saying, U.S. government, you're going to give us the remains of Big Boss, or we're going to use our walking bipedal nuclear battle tank Metal Gear Rex to launch nukes at you. Solid Snake's got to go stop the nuclear threat and stop, like I said, Psycho Mantis, Vulcan Raven, Liquid Snake, Sniper Wolf, probably forgetting some people in there, all these like iconic Metal Gear Solid characters, like, you know, first took place in that game. All right, so get this, then Metal Gear Solid 2 takes place, I forget how many years in the future, I want to say like 15 years in the future. And even though people thought that they were going to play the whole game out as Solid Snake, because that's what Kojima made everybody think at the time, you actually only play the beginning part of that game as Solid Snake. After the beginning chunk of the PlayStation 2 game, there's like a 2-year jump in time. And you find out at one point or another early on that you're actually playing as Raiden. Raiden's like a soldier, I forget what his shtick was. He was basically just molded again by like the U.S. government. The plot in Metal Gear Solid 2 is incredibly sci-fi, incredibly complex. I still don't wrap my head around all of it. But the cool thing about that game is, like, even though you're not playing a Solid Snake, which a lot of people were pissed off about, you're kind of playing alongside Solid Snake the whole time. So it's like you're not playing as the legendary soldier, but you're actually getting to see him from, you know, like a different perspective. It was a really, really interesting game. I really liked it at the time. At this point in the Metal Gear Solid timeline, though, you start getting into AI systems controlling the government. You start getting into, like, well, Metal Gear Solid 1, you get into, like, gene therapy. Like, here's a crazy thing in Metal Gear Solid 1, right? All the soldiers walking around that you're trying to sneak away from in Metal Gear Solid 1 actually are, like, part Big Boss. Like, they've all gone through, like, this gene therapy back from when they were doing, like, cloning projects and stuff like that. So Metal Gear Solid 2 gets, like, even more into... That's when you start getting into, like, nanomachines. Or was it Metal Gear Solid 1 that was nanomachines? You start getting into nanomachines and AI systems and, like, this crazy future, right? And so then after Metal Gear Solid 2, you have Metal Gear Solid 4, where you actually play as Solid Snake again. And Metal Gear Solid 4 is an incredible game if you've played all the other games in this series. There's so much ridiculously awesome fan service in that game that basically wraps up all of the loose ends in the storyline. You play as Solid Snake again, and he's old, and he's aging really, really fast. You find out more about, like, the cloning projects and, like, AI systems that are running the world. Basically, the world of Metal Gear Solid 4 is it's like where the world's economy is run on and by war. War run by governments and private military corporations and stuff like that. You've got, like, sci-fi looking bipedal machines running amok, like on battlefields and stuff like that, like stealth technologies everywhere. Raiden, who you play as in Metal Gear Solid 2, comes back as, like, a crazy cyborg ninja. A lot of people criticize Metal Gear Solid 4 of being more movie than it was a game. Like, it is, like, it's one of those games where you'll be playing the game for, say, like 20 minutes, and you'll hit suddenly, like, a 45-minute long cutscene. The ending of that game, I forget. It's either, like, literally 45 minutes long, or it's like literally 90 minutes long. You play that game. I mean, you watch that game more than you play it. But like I said, it's, you know, it's Kojima, man. The cinematography is incredible. The writing at that point in the series is, like, super anime and over the top. And there are so many incredible moments in that game where even if you just played Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 4 is a blast. And all this said, with all this complicatedness, you kind of have to wonder why should I, Scott Hannon, who knows very little about all of this Metal Gear insanity, why should I give Metal Gear Solid 5 the time of day, which is pretty much where we're at? Oh, wait, well, it's where we're at aside from, I mean, do you mind if I hop into, like, personal history? You want to hop into personal history with the series?
Yeah,
you already said you didn't play that much of it. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to elaborate. You know, I watched our mutual friend Garrett play quite a bit of it, and when I sat down to play it, it just didn't click with me. I remember even trying to play it many years later, when I decided to reinvestigate some of the great PlayStation RPGs that came out, like Final Fantasy 7 and 9 and so forth. Yes, somebody lent me a copy of Metal Gear Solid. It's like, you seriously have to play this game. And I think, what was it? Was that a 3-disc game? It was huge, right?
It was 2. It was 2 discs.
It was at least 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I got through the first disc, and then by the time I got to the second, I lost the interest in pursuing it, and then probably some other stuff came up. Past that, like I said, I dabbled a little bit with the second one on PlayStation 2. But yeah, it was just never a series that caught my attention, that made me feel like I needed to keep playing it. So I was completely left behind by everyone else's enthusiasm. What about you?
Yeah, I started with Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1. Interesting little story that I've got for it. I didn't know anything about like the NES games or something like that. I don't even think I found out about those games until, I don't know, maybe just like a couple of years ago or something like that. Like when the Legacy collection came out or something like that. I was like, oh, holy crap. And one day I was sitting there in my bedroom, young Matt, and I popped in one of the PlayStation magazine demo discs, and there was what was purely a video trailer for this game called Metal Gear Solid. I thought it sounded really weird at the time, and I remember the video, or like the sneak peek, was just a shot of like a battle tank rolling up in the snow and shooting like a tank, like the tank missile out, and the missile hitting like the snow, and the particle effects going everywhere, and like this character all dressed in gray jumping back, and the camera work was cool, and it was like, it just faded out, and I was like, okay. And I don't know what made me decide to get like really pumped to finally try that game out, but I do remember that like an issue or two after that, once again, like PlayStation Magazine, there was finally like a playable demo disc for like this crazy cinematic game that like everybody was talking about. And I went to the software store at the time, and I brought home the magazine, and I opened up the magazine for where the demo disc should be, and somebody had ripped open the magazine and took the disc out. And I was freaking heartbroken. I literally traveled all the way to the mall to go get that magazine. And the next day, I forget who drove me, but I got a ride to the mall again to return the magazine and just get like one with the demo disc in. Scott, that was one of those demos where, kind of like Ground Zeroes, like there was very little gameplay in it. It was like you infiltrate the beginning of the game, and then like one little chunk after it where you're like outside, and the infamous scene with like the Hind helicopter like taking off, and like the 2 spotlights going over the helipad, and as soon as you crawl in a ventilation shaft there, the demo stops. But I can't count like how many times I played that thing over and over and over again. I started noticing like it was just like I was playing with the AI. I was like, oh, if I get spotted and then I hide, like how long will it take for the snow to cover up my foot tracks before excuse me, before the enemies won't find me anymore. And I was just playing with it for weeks and weeks before I got that game. And Metal Gear Solid 1 for me was one of those games that I played it over and over and over again. I earned all the bonus items you can get at the end of the game, the bandana for unlimited ammo, the stealth camouflage. I tried doing perfect runs through the game where I never got spotted once. I don't think I ever achieved that. But yeah, I absolutely loved it despite, and I don't know how old I would have been at the time, maybe, I can't do the calculation right now. We'll say somewhere between like 15 and 17 years old. And I still didn't understand like how deep that game was. Like I knew it was preaching to me about like nuclear warfare and, the state of politics and the Cold War and different things like that. The game was kind of like this weird pseudo history lesson that both was and wasn't really history. But I didn't understand things like when you meet the DARPA chief in the game, that the DARPA chief Donald Anderson, that like he's not really the DARPA chief, that like he's actually Decoy Octopus, and Decoy Octopus like took over his identity because while Ocelot was interrogating the real DARPA chief, like they killed him. I didn't understand things like that. And then like in Metal Gear Solid 3, you meet like a character who's like your weapons specialist, and his name is it's like Sigint or something like that. And and like that's actually like the young DARPA chief and stuff like that. Like the series is crazy. Anyways, long story short, I played it since Metal Gear Solid 1, and I have played each of the games in the series after that. I've kept up to date with it, but it wasn't until Metal Gear Solid 5 that I actually played one of those games at launch. I played Metal Gear Solid 2 a few weeks after launch. I played Metal Gear Solid 3 a couple weeks after launch. And Metal Gear Solid 4 I didn't play on PlayStation 3 until, I don't know, probably a year or two after the game came out.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's like I've played them all. I would say like I'm a fan of the series, but I am not a hardcore super fan.
Sure.
I'm just a big fan.
Right. Just a regular fan.
Yeah, I'm a regular fan. That's why, I don't know, if there are any super fans listening to this, I probably, I will get chunks of information wrong, or will mispronounce things, or, fudge up part of the timeline and stuff like that. I'm sorry about that. It's like, we have an outline here sitting in front of it. It is the most broad thing that anybody could possibly imagine. And so when I come up with information on this series, it's all off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like the history of the story within the game is intricate enough that like you would almost have to be keeping notes as you went along to make sure you kept track of all the threads.
Yeah, and so like leading up to Metal Gear Solid 5 for me, because I knew the series was going to go full circle, like I said, I watched Twitch streams of the older games, of the original games, to see what the gameplay was like. I went online and all sorts of like Metal Gear wikis and databases and stuff like that. I read about all the characters that I had never met because I didn't play the games. Everything about the timeline, all of the speculation, all the stuff that was super concrete and stuff like that. And so basically everything I didn't know, I filled myself in on.
It's like a full Metal Gear Solid history lesson.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I think is incredible about this series is that, like when you look up information on it, you can look up information on, yes, the development of the game, the creation of the game, and stuff like that. But just like, I don't know how many games do. It's just like the game has its own lore, it has its own history, and not every game, goes into that.
I'm amazed.
That,
I'm amazed that the story has been kept consistent since the first game.
It's incredible, right?
I mean, that's blowing my mind. That's over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games.
Yeah.
And
go on.
And it's a non-linear, multi-threaded story that it sounds like Kojima has had in mind since the beginning.
He either has, or
he's a master at retcon.
Yes, yeah, and I think he's a little bit of both, because when we get to some spoilery Metal Gear Solid 5 stuff later on, I'm curious to see what you think about how he handled making it go full circle, like if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, let's give it a shot anyway.
We're at the point now where enough people have I won't say beaten, I will say beaten/completed Metal Gear Solid 5 to where once again he has divided his fan base with what he's done. He's made some people, he's got people like me who are on the boat where I'm just like, wow, I can't believe how ridiculously creative this whole project was, this whole story, this whole circle was. And then you've got people who are like, who think that the ending to Metal Gear Solid 5 is the most bullshit thing that he could have ever come up with, and that essentially, he's created another Metal Gear Solid 2. With the whole Raiden thing, if that doesn't give anything away. So I think we're at the point where we should dig into Metal Gear Solid 5, unless
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Do you want to talk about the lead up to the game, how it was teased and so forth?
Yeah, actually I do. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. And also, for the record, I'm going to do a thing where we're right now where we're at, or at least where we get in Metal Gear Solid 5. When I write out a description for this thing, for people who really don't give a crap about the history and me bumbling my way through, X amount of years of Metal Gear history, like I'll make it so people can just reach this point in the podcast and listen from here on out, because I got a feeling this chunk going forward will be a lot more smooth than everything that we've talked about prior to this point. Yeah, so the lead up to Metal Gear Solid 5, and like Metal Gear Solid 5's story is actually split into two games. It's split into Ground Zeroes and Metal Gear Solid 5 the Phantom Pain. And you can play Phantom Pain by itself, but you will get a lot more enjoyment out of it, I think, if you play Ground Zeroes first. But yeah,
And which one is that?
Ground Zeroes is Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. It's the one that is also on 360, PS3, PC now, you know.
Oh, so that was the one that was released like earlier this year?
Yeah, it's
It was like that portion of the game?
Yeah, it's that chunk of the game that people were ticked off when it had like the $40 price tag when it first launched on the next gen consoles. It was $40. People were ticked off because you can beat the main quest in, like I said, anywhere between say 7 minutes and 20 minutes, with it taking people an hour on average. Like $40 is kind of like a steep asking price. But then you've got people like me, for example. There's side missions you can do in there. In time trials and all sorts of other stuff. And I think all told, I got about 20 hours out of that game.
It's pretty good still.
Yeah, so it's not bad. But yeah, I mean, the anticipation leading up to this game was just like crazy. When Kojima first unveiled it, he didn't unveil Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. He like unveiled this project with a studio called Moby Dick Studios. And at the Spike Video Game Awards with Jeff Keighley at the time, they ran this trailer from a company called Moby Dick Studios, and it was of this guy waking up in a hospital and kind of just fumbling his like half limp body through the hallways of the hospital while psychic children float through the air and men on fire walk the hallways and giant space whales fly through the air at the end. And everybody was like, wow, this looks really crazy, but like, what the heck is it? And, Kojima basically, said like, oh, we'll have more information on it later. Worth noting is that in the trailer, like the guy's face, like the main character's face is all like bandaged up, but like people began analyzing this footage and they said, the parts of the bandaged face that you can be kind of looks like it could be Solid Snakes or Big Bosses. And like, hey, this man on fire, when you pause and you look at him, actually looks like a version of Colonel Volgin, who is one of the main bad guys in Metal Gear Solid 3, but it looks like a version of Volgin that was never used in the game. Like it was like an outfit that never made it into like the final build of the game. And then some people said like, hey, this floaty kid could hypothetically be a very young Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid 1. And people started piecing all these things together. And at the time, I should mention, at the end of like the Moby Dick Studio, whatever trailer thing, the game was just called The Phantom Pain. But there were like these little slivers, these lines that were cut out in the Phantom Pain title that people figured they figured out that like when you fill in the lines, it actually says Metal Gear Solid 5, kind of like overlaying the Phantom Pain and stuff like that. So people figured it out. The game went through these phases. So like the Moby Dick Studios, like eventually it was unveiled that this game was running in a thing called like the Fox engine, and then from the Fox engine, blah blah blah. Like eventually Kojima was like, yes, you guys were right. It's the new Metal Gear game and stuff like that. But it never stopped for like the 4 or 5 years or however long it was that people waited for the Phantom Pain to come out. It was like Kojima edits every single one of the trailers that's put out there, the cinematic trailers. I'm not sure about the gameplay trailers. And so every single time a new trailer comes out, you have people making trailer analysis videos where they basically replay and stop and pause and slow motion every single detail of these trailers to try to figure out what the heck is going on in this game ahead of time. And I wonder if Kojima loves it or not, because I watched a lot of these like trailer analysis videos leading up to the Phantom Pain. For some reason, I was not afraid that like anything was going to be spoiled or anything like that for me. Sure. Like, how could it be? They were fan theories. And
it's fun to have those ideas in your head as you play the new game.
Yeah. Like I really enjoyed it. And the funny thing was, a lot of the trailers were just like completely off the mark and ludicrous, and like Kojima didn't go in any of these directions that some people anticipated he might be going in with bringing the series full circle. But there were a couple of observations that were made, and then theories that were developed from these very key observations that actually did end up being true. and they were really, really big things. Like massively huge things that, like, again, when we go into like the deepest spoiler territory possible, had to do with the actual outcome of what this game is actually about. So yeah, massive amount of build up to this game. Should we go into the core of the game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so as I put here in the outline, this game, for the first time ever, okay, for the rest of this conversation, I'm not going to mention Ground Zeroes. Ground Zeroes was the first time that people got their hands on like this quote unquote sandbox version of, you know, the Metal Gear Solid gameplay. It was the first time the game controlled and felt like unlike anything that we had ever seen before in like a Metal Gear game. The Phantom Pain was really the full realization of these ideas that Kojima presented us with in Ground Zero. So from here on out, this is strictly going to be about the Phantom Pain. I just want people to keep in mind that we had seen a lot of this stuff in Ground Zeroes. In the outline here, I basically said that this game is like Peace Walker meets Far Cry 3.
Right.
Yeah. And so for the first time ever, you have essentially this game is comprised of like two massive sandboxes. You've got the Afghanistan portion of the game, which is, you know, the big desert landscape, and then you have the Africa portion of the game. It's Africa. It's jungly. It's more muddy. In Afghanistan, you see, you know, sandstorms is like your main weather pattern that'll, you know, come in besides like the changing day-night cycle and stuff like that. And then in Africa, you've got the thunderstorm equivalent. And why I say it's like Far Cry 3 meets Peace Walker is because, like in Peace Walker, you're stealthing, or you can go like you can go guns blazing in this game if you want. But if you're stealthy and you're silencing enemies and you're taking them out with like tranquilizer rounds or, you know, like chokeholds and things like that, you can do the Peace Walker thing where you strap a balloon to them and you send them off to your base, and you basically you're building your private militia ever. Remember, at the end of Ground Zeroes, it's like your base is destroyed. Everything has been taken away from you. And so if the Phantom Pain is really about waking up from a 9-year-long coma. This game takes place 9 years after Ground Zeroes when, for now, we'll just say when Snake wakes up in the hospital, like the Video Game Award trailer show. It's like waking up in the hospital, and the hospital's being assaulted. And eventually you get to a point early on in the game where it's like, hey, well, it's time to get revenge, and to get revenge, we need to build this army again. And so it's the Peace Walker gameplay of recruiting soldiers and building your base, except unlike Peace Walker, where the game's all built around, you know, like I described it as kind of like a giant spreadsheet, you actually have, for the first time, like a physical representation of this mother base that you can go back to whenever you want. And it's, you know, like built in the middle of the ocean. And this thing starts off as like a small platform that you can run around on with like a, you know, like the few soldiers that you have at your immediate disposal. And like you go there and the soldiers like salute you, and you can practice with them. You can do you can practice like your firearms there and stuff like that. Essentially what I'm getting at is like the more people you extract, the more resources in the environment that you extract, whether it's diamonds for money, whether it's you know, plants that you're going to use for medicine, you earn fuel and minerals and all this stuff, and essentially you buy gear and you make your gear more powerful. You can customize your weapons and your vehicles, and you watch this base build, and you get your intel division and your medical division and your support division and your command division. And unlike the spreadsheet that was Peace Walker, it's like this place, you can actually drive around on it. You can listen to conversations between the soldiers there. You go back to it, and there's all sorts of like, you know, just kind of like cutscenes and story progression that's involved in it. And so it's like this very tangible physical thing. It can be infiltrated by other players. You can go infiltrate other players' mother base and stuff like that. And so it's just like this very rewarding feeling to watch this thing grow. And where the Far Cry 3 comes into is like, you know, like Far Cry 3, you've got like outposts that you capture, and if you choose a stealthy approach, you can do that thing in Far Cry 3 where you're essentially sitting on a hilltop overlooking the base, and you're kind of like scouting out the location ahead of time, and you're marking enemies. And
Mhm.
you know, that way when you go into combat, it's kind of like you know where the enemies are ahead of time, and you've developed a strategy, you know, a plan of attack. And you can do that same thing in Metal Gear now, where you can sit on that hilltop and you can scan in with your binoculars and you can mark enemies. Except this time, because of like the recruiting system and stuff like that, you can get to the point where not only are you marking enemy locations, but you do this thing where you scan their body. And here's where like some of like the goofy, like pure gameness of it comes in. It's like you scan their body and you can see whether they're an E, D, C, B, A, S, double S, blah, blah, blah. Like essentially they're ranked in different categories. You can see ahead of time, how good is this soldier's combat prowess? How good of a medic are they? How good are they as an intel unit or a support unit? And based on those things, you can choose like, hey, that guy's like a prime, that guy's combat, you know, stats are like amazing. Of course I'm going to go take him back to my base. Because when you take him back to your base, and he's like really good at combat, he has the potential to add to, say, like your combat statistics at your base. So you might extract that guy who's got like an A or an S rank in combat. He goes back to your base. Your combat section of your base levels up. Like literally, I mean like level 1, 2, 3, you know, beyond 50 and stuff like that. And as you're recruiting and as you're leveling these things up, more things are unlocking. You're unlocking more weapons and gadgets, and it does this thing where everything you do in the game, everything that you physically do in the gameplay feeds into a system, and these systems feed into other systems, and you're constantly making things bigger and better and more expansive, whether it's weapons or vehicles or mother base. It's just awesome. Like,
Mhm.
but here's the thing, like I said, so like
Yeah.
you can go in and you can
Sounds like
silence
there's a
people.
lot of consequence to what you do.
There is, and
Yeah.
here's the beauty of the game. Like, for the first time ever in a Metal Gear game, Scott, like I was kind of like you, where, you know, like I said, obviously, like I love this series and like I keep playing each iteration of it. I kind of never really liked the stealth mechanics in any of the other games, and I sort of just played them because, you know, Snake's a cool character. I really like the storylines and the lore, and I always liked how Kojima seemed to push technology, like the console technology with each iteration. I loved how cinematic these games were, but I never liked getting seen. I was always one of those people. I always felt like if I got seen, like even though it wasn't game over, I always felt like it was like, oh, like I might as well restart.
Right.
For the first time ever in this game, if you're seen and shit starts hitting the fan, actually, no, let me rephrase this. The game does this thing where if you're seen, it goes into a slow motion mode for you. So an enemy soldier spots you and the exclamation mark goes above his head. The game goes slow motion, and it gives you a chunk of time to line up a shot wherever you want to aim on their body, you know, whether you're taking them out with bullets or you're taking them out with, you know, silencing tranquilizers. And it gives you a moment to remedy having been seen. So he sees you, slow motion, pop him in the head with a tranquilizer, and he goes to sleep. And the alarms are not set off. Now, whether or not the thud of his body hitting the ground, you know, makes another soldier who's, you know, semi-close by go, what was that? You know, and like walk over to where he thinks the sound was or not. You know, that's another story. That's where the game gets really cool. So, okay, so you silence this guy. His body makes a thud sound. A soldier in a building close by, like, here's the sound. Sometimes he'll just go inspect it by himself. Sometimes he'll say, like, HQ, I heard a funny sound. You know, let's tighten up security. HQ will be like, yeah, you know, you do a patrol. You know, make sure nothing's going on. And so the next thing you know, you're either picking up this body. You don't have to like drag guys across the ground like you did in the old Metal Gear games. That was like really clunky. You pick them up, you put them over your shoulder. You can either run and stuff. You know, it's like do I quietly try to like sneak away and just, you know, leave no evidence of like what I just did? Do I dump this guy in a dumpster? Do I leave the body there, hide in the dumpster myself, wait for his buddy to come around the corner, get spooked by the body, and then do I pop out of the dumpster and then grab that guy into the dumpster with me? Like there's like an infinite amount of things you can do because of the attention of detail that they have put into the sandbox. And this is where, in my mind, like it eclipses games like Far Cry 3. Don't get me wrong, I love Far Cry 3, and I think it's a fantastic game. And you can stand on the mountain and you can scope things out. You can go in silently and do like the cool like knife stealth kill combos, or you can choose to snipe the door on the tiger cage and have the tiger like run out and basically take out the base for you, or at least create chaos so you can still go in like stealthy and do things. But
Sure.
the artificial intelligence like systems that they've built in Metal Gear Solid 5 are so, I guess you could say, smart and diverse in the AI's approach to trying to figure out where you are and what's going on, that you truly believe that it's this game of cat and mouse. Where like I said, like it's line of sight based, it's sound based, but it's they radio back to HQ, but then you can do things like, all right, like I'm gonna basically go in as stealthy as I can, but if crap gets crazy, you can sneak around the base ahead of time, and you can plant C4 on their satellite dishes, and you can make it so like if you're spotted and they try to radio HQ, keep saying CQ. I think I'm thinking of like command quarters or whatever. Like we'll say HQ headquarters. You can just like detonate the C4, which makes it so like they can't send like radio signals out to like come and get reinforcements and things like that.
Nice.
You can put C4 on like the even bigger satellite dish that's often at like the bigger bases, and so like if you need a helicopter extraction, they don't have air radar, so your helicopter can get closer. You can make all of these decisions ahead of time. Like there's things, Scott, like for example, I was listening, I think it was Giant Bomb's podcast, and they were talking about somebody figured out there's this thing in the game, and I thought it was really goofy at first, where sometimes you find cassette tapes in this game, and the cassette tapes will be everything from like intel files, mission briefings, but you find some like goofy ones where it's like the sound of a guy going to the bathroom, the sound of or the audio tape of a soldier saying something like HQ, everything is fine, blah blah blah. And I was playing around in the game's menu system, and I was playing these cassette tapes like you can in the menu system, and you do all of this in real time. You pull out this device called an iDroid, and you can tinker with like maps and mission briefing info, like all in real time. It's like the the sun's going.
iDroid.
Yeah, it's called an iDroid, like right, like the combination of like both things. It's so funny.
Yeah.
And I found this button on the iDroid that I didn't really understand at first, and it's like a button where you can choose to listen to these briefings as Snake/Big Boss would hear them in his headset, like in his earpiece, or you could choose to play them as if they're coming out of the little speaker of the iDroid device. And somebody on this podcast that I was listening to pointed out that the things that you think are stupid are actually not so stupid. So if you're seen by the enemy, but HQ is sending reinforcements and stuff like that, and in the meantime, while they're sending reinforcements, you manage to actually take out the rest of the base, whether it's stealthy or not, you can actually play the speaker version of like HQ, everything's fine on your iDroid, and like HQ will be like, oh, everything's fine, okay, we're calling back the reinforcements. You can hide in porta potties in this game, Scott, and you can be sitting in the porta potty, and if the enemy's looking around for you, or heck, if one of the soldiers randomly is going to go into the bathroom to use it, and you can play the sound of like the farting soldier off of your iDroid, and like he'll walk up to it and be like, oh, somebody's in here, going to the bathroom, and he'll like leave. You can do all sorts of crazy, ridiculous things in this game that like people are still figuring out. All of like these little, call them Easter eggs, if you will, that actually have like effects on the gameplay. Somebody recently today I was listening said that these tapes of like HQ, everything's fine, or like pooping sounds and stuff like that, because you're playing them back on cassette tape. If you try doing that stuff too often, you actually run out the amount of uses on you wear the tape down. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Much like the silencer on a pistol, your cassette tapes will wear out after a while. Like the attention to detail in this game is stunning. I mean, it doesn't stop there. Like the day-night cycle is incredible. The Fox engine in general, the way that it handles lighting is breathtaking, whether it's high noon or deep at nighttime. Like I said, weather, sandstorms, like enemies can't see you in sandstorms. If it's raining, if it's a thunderstorm and stuff like that, their visibility will be cut. And it makes it so they can't hear your footsteps as much. It's just like every single
Question.
thing. Yeah.
As far as the weather is concerned, do you have the ability to pay attention to weather forecasts?
Yes. Not.
So,
You
like, you
can't.
could plan a raid on a base during a sandstorm.
Yes, but here's how it works. Like you don't have an hourly forecast, or you can't look ahead at the weather, but you get the ability. It's one of those things that's not given to you. You earn it. I forget if it's your support team or your intel team. I think it's your intel team. You eventually earn the ability to have them forecast you on weather, and you'll get like a message on your iDroid, and it'll be audio, and it'll say like, um, attention, sandstorm approaching. And then like a couple minutes later, the sandstorm will hit. So if you're hiding in a porta potty or a dumpster or just in bushes or under a bed in a building or wherever it is that you are, you know that in a couple minutes, you're going to have one of those moments where visibility is going to be cut, their audio capabilities, the enemy's ability to hear you is going to be cut, and you have everybody marked. And so you can just go through that base like a stealth assassin with your night vision goggles on, or whatever time it is during a sandstorm, and just do business like you might not have been able to do, especially if you're trying to infiltrate during the day. You might have been struggling more than you anticipated, and that sandstorm will change everything. And like, they're not idiots. It's not like, oh, there's a sandstorm there that it's the enemies are completely oblivious to like everything you're doing. It's like, no, if you're still being loud, they're going to know. If you still get too close to them and you're walking up to their face, like, they're going to see you and be like, what's that? Or whatever version of alertness the game feels is like appropriate. But and then later on in the game, when I don't know if it's your what division it is of your mother base, but one of them gets high enough to the point where you get weather manipulation tools.
Awesome.
Yeah, I haven't tried causing a rainstorm in Afghanistan yet, because it won't rain there on its own.
Right.
So I don't know if they react to, like, what the heck is going on? Why is it raining?
Right.
But essentially, it's one of those games that ramps up, and everything that's hard for you early on in the game becomes a little bit more easy, and a little bit more easy, and a little bit more easy, whether it's more slow motion reaction time that you've earned, or your suppressors on your weapons, don't degrade as fast, or you flat out just get tons of weapons that you didn't have access to later on. So it's one of those games where early on, maybe you're making it through a mission with like like an ED or C rating, and you're not doing that good, but you attempt to tackle those same missions later on in the game, and you have all sorts of like tools and resources that you never had before. Maybe you don't have C4 in the beginning, but you finally get it, so you can do that thing, like I said, like plant it wherever you want it. I mean, you don't even have to plant C4 like on like satellite dishes and stuff like that. Like if you're on the outskirts of a base, leave C4 right there if you want. And if you're infiltrating and like the enemy's onto you too much, in whatever form that takes, detonate the C4 out in the field.
Yeah.
And there's a good chance they'll hear it, and they'll just go on patrol out there and give you free reign of the base. There's so many things you can do. It's like, it's one of those sandboxes where basically the game never tells you no.
Interesting.
Yeah. The game never says, no, you can't do that. It's really mind-boggling at first, and one of the reasons why it's so easy to fall in love with its brand of stealth and action. But here's the other cool thing that they did, right? Is they give you all sorts of like missile launchers and grenade launchers and assault rifles, and you get like a heavy damage resistance flak jacket that you can put on. And if you want to land your helicopter in the middle of that base, have the helicopter firing missiles, and if you want to sit on the Gatling gun on the side of it and jump out of the helicopter, take out all the soldiers and run into their base and extract the prisoner that you set off to get, you can do that. And like, yeah, you're going to get docked points for killing soldiers instead of being stealth or instead of tranquilizing them, and you're not going to give yourself the opportunity to potentially, extract high-ranking soldiers and stuff like that. But the game rewards you so highly for doing things quickly that you can still S rank or A rank missions that way. It's really cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So for the first time ever in a Metal Gear game, there are benefits to going stealth. Like I said, Fulton extraction and things like that. You're building your base by not killing guys. You're building up your army. But if you just had it up to here with stealth and you want to go play around and run jeeps into buildings and put C4 on stuff and go in with missile launchers and grenade launchers, even if it's to complete, what could otherwise be a stealthy mission, the game lets you do it and it doesn't heavily penalize you for it.
It's interesting because one of the I've been trying to think of like how Metal Gear works as a sandbox game, and my major limitations being that I don't know the Metal Gear series very well, but thinking of the limitations of other sandbox games like Skyrim or even Grand Theft Auto, these are games that have created worlds that don't necessarily react in complex ways to you, and nor can you interact with them in complex ways.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what it sounds like you're saying is that Metal Gear is at least a solid step in that direction. In that it, like you said, the game doesn't say no to you necessarily, which is, of course, technically impossible, but it at least opens up more avenues that previous games didn't allow. Like, I remember back in the day when Fable came out and how disappointed I was at how limited the game was. Not only was it not a world that you could run around anywhere you wanted, but the game had dedicated paths through forests that you couldn't veer off of. And this was post-Morrowind,
Right.
And so it was so frustrating to have been told that this game was going to be this open world, morally ambiguous game that was going to allow you to make all these decisions. And the game, at the very end, really railroads you. You not only can't choose your missions anymore, or you not only can't run where you need to go anymore, but you can't even choose your missions.
You actually, I don't know, if you, I can piggyback you right now and kind of segue into how that works in Metal Gear.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so there's a free roam mode in the game where you can just, like I said, run around, you can explore. There's actually not that much to explore in the game. Outside of the bases, like sometimes you'll see enemies patrolling or driving trucks and stuff like that. There's some wildlife. If you Fulton extract enough wildlife in the game, you get to the point where you actually build a zoo, and then you can go to your zoo, and you can see all your animals and stuff there. And it's got kind of like a Far Cry system where there's like rare animals in the game that you can that you can capture and stuff like that. Anyways, point being that you can free roam in the game whenever you want, and while you're free roaming, there's like literally over 100 side ops that you can eventually tackle. Everything from it's usually like prisoner extraction or assassination requests, and even then with the assassination requests, you don't have to assassinate, you can extract, and then you just lie to the client and tell him that the guy's dead, but he's not. Point being that while you're free roaming, you can take on side quests, and at any point you can go on your iDroid and you can say, I want to do one of these main missions, which are highlighted in yellow, so you know which ones are like the main story content. And you can just say, like, okay, I'm gonna take this main story mission on. And then in your map, you'll get a radius marker for like, okay, I got to go over here and I'm going to do some main story content. And then what you do is you find, like, let's say you're exploring like the Afghan desert and stuff like that. You'll actually find it's kind of like you find a device that you basically plug your iDroid into, and you get your mission briefing there, and then you suddenly you'll start the main mission, as opposed to, and that's how you do it in like the free roaming mode. But if you were at Mother Base and you said, I'm going to do a main mission, what you would do is you're at Mother Base, you'd say, okay, helicopter, come down, pick me up. And the helicopter comes down and you hop in it and you go to like the helicopter version of your mobile operating base. And from the helicopter, you'd say, I want to go into a main mission. And so, okay, you click on the main mission. And you click on the main mission and you tell the helicopter, okay, drop me, say, in one of 3 locations. You choose where you're going to get dropped in the helicopter. and how, you know, there's a little scene, the helicopter drops you off, and you get your mission briefing and stuff like that, and you start the mission that way. So it's like you can start the mission manually from Mother Base, from your helicopter, or while you're free roaming, you can just choose where you want to go next and what mission you're going to take on. And you know, during the missions, kind of like classic Metal Gear, some of the missions are bigger than other missions. Some of like the main missions are really, really huge story, plot twisty missions, and some of them are kind of they're a little bit lighter on story, and they're more kind of like story progression missions. And so sometimes before or after a mission, you'll get one of like Kojima's infamous. None of them are really long in this game. We'll say like a short to medium length cutscene that's giving you like storyline exposition. Not all the missions do that, but that stuff still exists in the game. I thought that there was a healthy amount of like Kojima's cool cinematic cutscene story things going on. I think I've been hearing around online that a lot of Metal Gear fans are kind of disappointed that there's not more of that kind of stuff, but I feel like...
You can't win, huh?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the difference between this game, right? It's like, okay, let's say Metal Gear Solid 1. I'm not sure how long you can beat that game, and I'm pretty sure you can beat that game in like 4 or 5 hours if you want to run through it. But, you know, like for the average person, that's probably like a 15-hour game.
Sure.
And in that 15-hour game, you have, I don't know, let's say 5 hours of gameplay, you know, with like 10 hours of codec conversations and or cinematic cutscenes. Whereas like this game, it's like reversed. You, instead of listening to codec cutscenes, you can be running around the game world, and like tranquilizing enemies and fultoning enemies back to your base and gathering resources and stuff like that, while you're listening to a 10-minute long codec conversation in your headset. And the game will do that thing where it kind of like, it doesn't mute, but it lowers a lot of like the gunshot sounds and like the ambient volume and stuff like that, so you can hear the conversation that's going on in your head. So the game doesn't pause to give you that kind of exposition, which is all optional.
Yeah.
And like, for example, I would say that this game still has a few hours of cinematic cutscenes. It's just that, like, for example, for me, those 3 hours are spread across, and I'm rounding, I don't know, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. I'd say at least 3 hours. You know, it's spread across 90 minutes. And so that means that, or not 90 minutes, I'm sorry, 90 hours.
Right.
So 3 hours of cutscenes and 87 hours of gameplay. It's way different than it used to be. But you know what I'm saying is like that, yeah, there's probably, it's just that there's probably about as many hours of cinematic cutscenes in this game as there have been in all of the, you know, the Metal Gear games by themselves. It's just that there's so much more gameplay here than there has ever been that it sort of eclipses the cutscenes quite often. The extreme counter to this being Metal Gear Solid 4. It's almost like the games are opposites, you know?
Right.
Whereas like Metal Gear Solid 4 had, I don't know, probably like 11 hours of cutscenes, you know?
Gosh, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Metal Gear Solid 5 sounds like it has the better balance. One of the complaints a friend of mine has about this like overusage of cutscenes is that you're essentially playing a video game to be rewarded with a movie.
Yeah.
And that's not a video game then at that point, you know?
You know what's funny about that, though, is I feel like I have loved that aspect of video games ever since the PlayStation era with the Final Fantasy games. I remember, you know, like I always loved RPG combat and stuff like that, but one of my favorite parts of every single one of those games, and especially buying a new game, was getting to see the next cool cutscene you get to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I think we all enjoyed them at the time as well because it was a new aspect of gaming, and unlike the, you know, quote unquote cutscenes of previous generations of gaming, you know, that were just in-game graphics where they take control away from you and suddenly your character scurries across the screen or whatever. We had something that was more cinematic, more dynamic visually and so forth. And I think just the trouble is that got out of control. And then, you know, when you look at it the way that my friend Tom describes it, it is weird to think that it's like a video game is saying, hey, video games aren't good enough, so we're going to reward you by playing well with a movie, as opposed to we're going to reward you with better gameplay or more of this game. And while I don't dislike cutscenes, I can see the contradiction inherent there, which is it's like saying we have to introduce a different art form into this one in order to make this video game a legitimate experience.
Yeah.
I just think that's a good perspective to have in order to temper the overusage of cutscenes. So like when you say that you've played 90 hours of the game and you've had about 3 hours of cutscenes, that feels more reasonable than, say, like the reviews for Metal Gear 4, where people are saying you watch the game more than you play it.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the case of Metal Gear Solid 4, which is why I could see why people who loved 4 for those 45-minute, like popcorn fests, I can see how they'd be upset here, just because I don't know, the cutscenes in 4 were just, like I mentioned earlier, they were just full of, like you're saying, like you're not playing Metal Gear Solid 4 the game, you're largely watching Metal Gear Solid 4 the movie. But if you love those characters and you love that world, it's like one of the best movies that you've ever watched, except every once in a while you get to play it and you get to interact with it. Whereas this is Metal Gear Solid, maybe for the first time ever, the game, and it's one of the most fun sandboxes I've ever had the pleasure of exploring and interacting with, and every once in a while I'm watching a clip of a movie. It's like the opposite, yeah. And it's one of those things that Kojima did again, where he divided his fan base, it seems. It's like people who love video games and love Metal Gear Solid. I think that there's a lot to appreciate here, but those people who were big fans of Metal Gear, the movie, it sounds like, there's some griping that's being done.
Yeah.
And I can
see
always. Yeah. But, I mean, we've talked about the sandbox a little bit, and kind of like how the systems in the games feed into each other. One of the things that I wanted to touch on was like the buddy system in the game. Do you think it's time to go into that, or do you have other questions, or you want to hit another beat first?
Let me ask you a question about the sandbox thing. Maybe this is too broad of a question before you finish up on these details, but this is the first of the Metal Gear games that's a full sandbox. You mentioned that Ground Zeroes was semi-sandbox, right?
Yeah. You know what? Ground Zeroes was more like a shoebox.
Okay. So let's just go ahead and say that Metal Gear Solid 5 is the first one that's like sandbox Metal Gear.
It is a true yeah.
Okay. Do you think that this is an appropriate style of game for the Metal Gear series?
Oh man, that's a broad question. Yeah. All right, let me an appropriate style game for this series. Is that what you asked me?
Yeah.
I think that if this series could have been anything all along, it probably should have been this, and that technology is finally at a place that allowed this game to exist in this form, and that it is the most pure form of what this game was trying to achieve all along. Like, is that to say that the gameplay movie balance couldn't be a little bit more in favor of the moviness? Like, yeah, I personally, while I'm not upset with the amount of cutscenes that were in this game, I could have done with a little bit more. Once again, they were some of my favorite parts of the games, were just like watching the, just the amazing cinematography that went into a lot of the game scenes and stuff like that. But it's an interesting question. Like, when you look at the evolution of the series, how we were talking about the the NES and then the PlayStation, and then like the PS2 gameplay, even Metal Gear Solid 3, the director's cut was the first time you could control. You had free movement of the of the camera, behind Snake's back for the first time, and just watching it evolve into this, I think it could not be any more appropriate.
Okay. So you touched on something else that I wanted to ask. I was going to hold it for later, but since you touched on it. So if you're thinking this is the most appropriate, do you think it's possible that this Metal Gear is the type of Metal Gear that Kojima has always wanted to make?
Good
and
question.
Just couldn't until recently.
Yeah, your mic's actually breaking up a little bit. Do I sound clear to you?
You sound fine to me.
Okay, you're coming through with like a little bit of static, and so I'm gonna hope it'll clear up as I answer the question. But if anybody couldn't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you asked. Wait, what did you ask?
I asked. So is this Metal Gear 5, now the type of Metal Gear game that Kojima has always wanted to make, but maybe couldn't until recently because of technological limitations, or maybe even just marketplace preferences?
Okay, I think you know what. Yeah, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm pretty sure that at one point or another he's made comment about gameplay wise. He's always dreamed of achieving like these, the balance of these systems with day-night cycles and the enemy's AI and the caliber that it is, and this idea of infiltrating a base from any angle that you want to. That specifically he's been thinking about trying to achieve those things for a very long time, that he specifically stated that technology was not at a point where he could achieve that until now. However, and you're still breaking up, so maybe after I finish the point here, is it possible for you to just disconnect and then reconnect with me?
I don't know. Am I still breaking up now?
Yeah, but what I was going to say was that I think the balance of cutscene to gameplay was probably a reaction to the criticisms he received about Metal Gear Solid 4. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you wanna try to I don't even know how you do this. Just like hang up and then come back.
Yeah, I'll try it.
Okay, I'll send you another invite here in a moment, and then I'll just edit out whatever gap we cause.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh wait, are you there still?
Yeah.
Never mind, you're back. You're clear.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't have that much open, but I closed a couple of things, so maybe that was all it took.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you're clear now.
Okay, good. Also, my internet out here sucks, so that might just be the case.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe you're doing too much Metal Gear research.
Yeah. Actually, I had like 3 or 4 pages open, so I closed them.
Yeah. So did I answer your questions? And that I think that the gameplay was a reaction to the criticisms about the amount of the length of the cutscenes in 4, but that I'm pretty sure that he stated gameplay-wise the idea of infiltrating bases as his characters, from any angles is an idea that he had for a very long time. And I think that he's just always done brilliant things with the technologies that he had to work on at the time, whether it was the MSX, PlayStation 1, PS2, 3, so on and so forth. But that he probably finally just achieved a certain vision for this series that he's had for a very long time.
Very cool.
That's my interpretation.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. All right, so then what other points? The buddy system, is that the one you want to move on to next?
We can gloss over it, but it's a big new addition to the game. Like, this wasn't even Ground Zeroes. This is new to Metal Gear Solid 5. It's this idea that you meet other characters throughout your journey of this game, and you can bring those characters into the game world with you, and they change up the gameplay quite a lot. As far as I know, unless there's something that somebody hasn't discovered, yeah, there's 4 of them that you can have in your party. You can have a character called Didi, or Didi. He's a dog. He's like a dog-wolf hybrid of some sort.
Nice.
And you find him when he's a puppy, and at some point in the game's storyline, he grows up into a full-fledged adult. And from a puppy, he's missing an eye also. So when he's like an adult, he has an eye patch. It's awesome. Anyways, but they do things for you. I'll go over them. I'll go over their abilities. You meet Quiet. She's pretty infamous at this time from people who have watched like the game's trailers and stuff like that. She's like a sniper. You get on your side, and she's got like fishnet leggings and pretty much wearing a bra. She's like, you know, 3/4 of the way naked the whole time. She's a sniper. But then you also get D horse, and everything is D something besides quiet because she's just a person. You know, like D dog, because the name of your unit is Diamond Dogs. So you get D the dog. You get, I guess the other one, I think it's D Walker. You get like a mech. That one of your scientist characters develops for you. So it's like this mech that you hop on that has both legs, so you can use it as like this little walker that you hop on to go over terrain, or like it crouches down and it turns into like, it's got wheels on it. It kind of feels like an RC car when you're driving around in it. But you get to like customize this stuff, right? So like the mech, you can put flamethrowers on it, Gatling guns, fold and recovery devices. You can put, you know, like stun, like give it electrical powers, all sorts of cool stuff. You also get D horse. It's like this horse that you ride around on it. It's like your first buddy companion that you get, and it's basically the first vehicle that you use to traverse the open desert. You know, like where you've got long stretches of land where you just don't want to hike it on foot. And hiking it on foot is pretty incredible sometimes. And the way the shaky cam is while you're running and stuff like that. They did this thing, Scott, where you're like running and the camera's kind of shaky, like a cameraman's following behind you. But you can also hear the sound of like the wind blowing in the microphone a little bit, and like the boots hitting the sand, and everything sounds amazing. The sound design in this game is incredible. Anyways, you get the horse, you get the mechanic walker, you get quiet on your side, and you get DD. The benefits of the horse is you can travel fast. Basically, the horse, you can just like travel fast. It does things like you can poop on the road, and if it poops on the road, and cars are driving down the road, they like spin out, and it's kind of like comical and stuff like that. And they're all dazed in the car, and you can like choose how you want to approach that situation once they're dazed. The dog's really cool in that, like a dog, he can sniff out ahead of you, like where all of the enemies are in a base, or where the prisoner you're trying to extract is. And so all this stuff will show up on your radar without having to actually see it with binoculars. Quiet the sniper is kind of like similar, where you can tell her on the map, like, I want you to sit here on this mountain, and I want you to like cover me as I infiltrate this base. Or, you know, you're making your way to the base, and you can say, go there ahead of time and like scout out all of the enemy positions. But like, unlike the dog, who can like see/sniff, whatever, however you want to describe it, through walls and floors and things like that, she can only spot for you what she can see with her own eyes. But like the difference is you can do all sorts of cool things with her. You can tell her, like, if enemies start wearing helmets. This game does this incredible thing, Scott, where like, if you go through a base too many times tranquilizing guys in the head and extracting them and stuff like that, they'll actually start wearing helmets. Like the next time you go to that base, the guys will actually have helmets on. Or if you use sleeping gas grenades to take them out, they'll start wearing gas masks, or any combination of those things. If you go in like guns blazing and just like shoot up the place, they'll start wearing heavy armor. Like the game, I don't want to say it like dynamically reacts to you, but like there are systems. It makes it so the next time you approach the same place, you will not necessarily be able to do the same tactics to take out the same people. So the guys that start
it prevents you from like using a monotonous style of gameplay. Like, this would be bad news for me, because in Far Cry 3, I approached every one of those outposts kind of the same. Yeah. Which was, you know, from a distance, take them out with a bow, drag them away.
Yeah. I don't know if you got windows open again, but you're breaking up a little bit again.
No, I haven't changed anything.
Oh, weird. Anyways, so you guys start wearing helmets, and you can tell her, you can say, take aim. She'll take aim on the guy that you're pointing to. And you can tell her, fire. And she'll like shoot the helmet off of the guy so that you can then tranquilize him in the head. Like you can tell you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she does all sorts of cool stuff like that. And the dog's awesome. You can tell the dog, actually, if you want to go with like an assault style with the dog, you can put like sneaking suit armor on him, and you can tell him to kill guys for you, and he actually has like a knife that he holds in his mouth, and he'll actually go and like jump and slit guys' throats for you. Or you can do like the stun variation of that, where like you won't kill him, but he'll stun him. You can just tell him, go distract this guy. So he'll like go and he'll grab a guy by the arm, and he'll like start like trying to, you know, tug at his arm or tug his weapon away from him while you sneak up behind him and like put him in a chokehold. And I also want to point out that another thing you can do to all these enemies, Scott, instead of either choosing to like kill them or tranquilize them and like fulton them out, when you have them in a chokehold, you don't even have to chokehold them, but you can bring up a menu where you can you can say like spit it out. You can interrogate them basically, and they'll be like, there's ammo stashed here, or there's blueprints for a new weapon here, or you can tell them, like, tell me where your friends are. Sometimes they don't cooperate with you, but sometimes they'll be like, we have a patrol here, and it'll highlight like an area where there's going to be enemies on a map. You can also do a thing where like you don't have to like sneak up behind an enemy and put them in a chokehold to do these things. If you sneak up behind an enemy with like a weapon drawn on them, you'll like spook the guys, and you'll actually they'll put their weapons down on the ground and they'll put their hands up in the air, and then you can give them like the same commands, like give me this information, blah blah blah, or you can tell them like get down on the ground. And you can do so many things like.
Huh. Cool.
So it's like its approach to stealth. Like again, it's another one of those layers on there. You can put a guy in a chokehold or whatever. You can say call your buddy. If you've got a plan, call this guy over here. Maybe there's a guy like back and forth on patrol who you're not sure how you're going to approach him, and you can have a friend call another guy, and it just gets more and more and more ridiculous the deeper you get into it. Like all the sorts of things that you can do, and you can also, the other thing you can do is if you're mid mission and you don't have the resources that you want in order to complete a mission the way that you want, like maybe you thought you were going in guns blazing and you want to go stealth, or vice versa, or like maybe you thought you were gonna be like more so infiltrating like in a like a lush forest environment, and you realize, wow, the end of this mission actually has me going to like an airport base, and like I should have like a different type of camouflage for infiltrating the airport base, or like heck, since I started this mission, it's no longer the middle of the day and it's nighttime now. I can use like my sneaking suit. You can go on your iDroid and you can actually have your base airdrop you whatever supplies you want that you don't have. And what keeps this from being just like a free game-breaking system and stuff like that is like everything that you do in this game, like getting new supplies and stuff like that, it all costs money. You're always earning money for completing missions or finding diamonds, like in the game's world and stuff like that. And so if you want new stealth gear or new weapons or stuff like that, it's going to cost you money. And so you have to balance your budget, because if you go into the red, like the morale of your soldiers back at your base is going to drop, and if morale gets too low, fights break out, and soldiers end up going into like sick bay from fighting too much. Some soldiers will flat out leave your base because they're losing confidence in you, and like it's insane.
Yeah, so there's a whole morale system too.
Yeah, a whole morale system. You don't get anything for free in that game. They make you work for everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a slightly similar system in Just Cause 2, where you can get like weapons drops essentially.
Oh, nice.
But it's just based on the money you have, and there's not like I imagine, so like if you're in the middle of this mission, you can't just drop your gear in front of you. Like if you're in the middle of the base or something, like you would have to leave the base, otherwise they'll see the helicopter. Is that?
No, you know what? The system is actually pretty stealthy. I have not yet seen the enemies pay attention to it. Basically, if you're inside a base and you want to drop it on top of yourself, it'll just land on the roof of wherever you're at. It's a crate that you can go get. I've heard that the enemies can actually go get the box that you drop, like can actually take your stuff. So it pretty much, I guess, it means that you wasted your money at that point.
Right.
But I think they'll just do it like, like, so basically, when you drop the thing, it comes on a parachute, but you hear the sound of the airplane flying over, but it's so high up that nobody will ever see it. And then like when the parachute gets low enough, it kind of like you see like a set of sparks go up through like the lines of it, and it eventually just sets the parachute on fire, and it kind of evaporates into nothing. Okay. So it's like your stuff doesn't magically appear inside the base, but the enemies don't say, hey, somebody's dropping supplies here, like go on patrol, or I haven't seen that happen yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of where we should go next. You brought up Just Cause 2. And while like I don't want to talk like too deeply about that game, just because I know it's not like the topic of the podcast, I will say from what I've seen of the Just Cause series, it's a lot more over the top than Metal Gear's approach to sandboxes for better. And I love that game has its own identity. Actually, one of the things I was going to say was that a part of me, for as wacky as the Metal Gear game, as the Metal Gear series has been, known for. Sorry, let me rephrase this. The Metal Gear series has always been known for a certain level of wackiness. You know, like I said, you get fart noises on your cassette tapes. The horse will poo in the road, and the car will spin on it if it hits the pile. You know, there is, you know, you're running around in a cardboard box. You can
right,
put, like,
right.
pictures of scantily clad ladies on the outside of the cardboard box in this game, and like stand up, and the soldiers will walk past it and be intrigued by it, you know, and you can like reach out and grab them and do all sorts of goofy stuff. But in regards to the larger version of the sandbox, the trees and the forests and the mountains, and being able to drive vehicles from point A to point B through these places and call in helicopters and things like that, I do wish that there was just a little bit more just cause in it. Like, I wish you could do cool things like start your mission jumping out of a helicopter, you know, and like parachuting into bases. The Fox engine has a really great physics engine, you know, built into it that you see when you're blowing up stuff, and you know, the physics for the vehicles and stuff like that. And I kind of, and you can get creative with how you use a lot of it, and it's awesome to be, you know, driving a Jeep at top speed, and then jumping out of it and watching like Snake roll across the ground, and the Jeep is like still going, and you can line it up so that you hit like an explosive barrel which takes out like a guard tower, you know, and you can create you know, chains of chaos like that. But you can't parachute down onto the peaks of a mountain and snipe from a mile away. And, you know, obviously there's no like coiling objects together and playing with you know, those kinds of systems that Just Cause is known for and stuff like that, with the rubber banding effects with like tying two objects together and stuff like that. And I feel like
You
there's
go from
room,
helicopter to helicopter to helicopter.
right? Yeah, and I feel like there's room for a certain level of that goofy awesomeness, in that if they had decided to put it into the Phantom Pain, despite the serious tone of some of the themes in this game, which we haven't even gotten to. Oh man, I feel like it really would not be out of place.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I said the word theme, and I said that we haven't talked about it. I'm sure that essays will one day be written about it. Like I said, you wake up 9 years after, you know, out of a coma, and the game is about revenge. It's, you know, once again, like the Metal Gear Solid, it's about like war economies, and, you know, just like the duties of a soldier to himself and his comrades, and, you know, versus, you know, governments. And in that story about revenge, it's, you know, once again, it's about nuclear warfare, and just kind of like how far men will go to, or how far people will go to, you know, seek revenge, and what the repercussions of those sorts of things are. And the storyline is as serious as it's ever been. This is the most, well, you know, and Ground Zeroes in that case, like, there's still some of the goofy sci-fi-ness in the game. From a reviewer's perspective, I both love and kind of don't like the storyline in this game simultaneously. And here's where, if you want to talk about it, we'll start going into like major spoiler territory.
Okay.
Okay. And like I said, we could probably talk about the story itself for hours upon hours upon hours. So some of the things I don't like about the story, right?
Sure.
I don't like that. So there's this character in this game. His name is Skullface. He's literally a man without a face. And
so he's Skeletor.
He's a modern day Skeletor that wears a fedora. He wears some sort of a hat. Skeletor. Yeah, Skeletor had a bad, you know, he burnt horrifically at a very young age, and taken from his village and stripped of his, you know, whatever native language it was that they were speaking there. I forget where his origin was. And at a certain point, I mean, he exists in the back of this series. You find out he's one of these people that back in the days of Metal Gear Solid 3, which takes place in, I think it's like the 1960s and stuff like that, when Naked Snake is trying to accomplish all this stuff for the U.S. government. Skullface is one of those people that exists in the shadows of that game that makes sure that everything goes according to plan for Snake. You know, he's got one of those positions, or he's got a very thankless job, one of those, nobody will ever know what you do positions in the government. You will never receive a medal for any of this, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
He gets to the point where he's just fed up with all of it. He's fed up with and this is my generalization of it. I'm sure it goes much deeper than all of this. And even I know it goes much deeper than all this. But for the sake of time, he gets fed up with all of this. But when he really thinks about the origin of where he's come from and what was done to him, he basically begins to see the United States government, and therefore, well, not therefore, but and with it, English speakers and like the English language as like this plague on the rest of the world, and just kind of like that Matrix thing where like the human beings are locusts, in the grand scheme of everything. Except in this game, it's sort of
virus.
Like, kind of like English is. And he devises this plan to basically discover and engineer these parasites that in the ancient history of mankind are what evolved to give us language to this, to like you and I are like sitting here having a conversation. At some point, our brains, along with all of the other crazy biological things that happen to our body, got us to the point where we're able to communicate like this. And he discovers that there's like these parasites that evolved with us that are basically what gave us language. And he figures out a way to make these parasites mate inside the human body and basically destroy people from the inside out. And he's gone so far as to devise a way that these parasites, that there's like different breeds of these parasites that essentially react and begin mating when they, sort of like they begin their mating process when they're sort of like reacting to like different languages, and so he basically gets to the point where he can make these parasites wipe out all of everybody who speaks the English language, or Spanish, or Portuguese, or Russian, or whatever he wants. And the beginning part of the Phantom Pain is about trailing this guy and figuring out what he's up to. It's alluded to at a certain point in the game that he has discovered a weapon that is going to be more devastating to people, to mankind, than nuclear warfare. It's like, oh, well, what could it be? Well, it turns out that he's devised a way to make it so that people infect each other and awaken these dormant parasites, and that these things will breed, and he'll essentially wipe English off the face of the planet, both getting back at the US government for how poorly they've treated him over the years, but also kind of like ridding the world of this, quote unquote, like superpower, or whatever we were back in the 1980s when this game takes place. Basically however the world sees us. It's like English as we know it will never be the same. And so you're uncovering the mystery of what he's trying to do and how he's trying to achieve it, and all of the people that are involved in making this a reality. And you bump into like this, I don't know, some guy who's part of a Native American tribe who discovered the parasites a long time ago. And the story is super Metal Gear-y. It's like basically, Scott, instead of having nanomachines in Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 4, we have parasites. Tiny, microscopic, I don't even know if they're microscopic, but tiny biological things that are destroying us from the inside out. It's basically, technology wasn't at a point where Kojima could say there were nanomachines doing everything, so there's parasites doing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the game does this really interesting thing where about halfway through the game, in a climactic battle with a Metal Gear unit, see, you don't care if I spoil any of this, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Skullface ends up dying. You don't even take him out in combat. He dies by getting crushed by all the chaos that this metal. There is a Metal Gear unit in the game, and you end up destroying it and retrieving it. Basically, he dies. So Skullface dies, and the credits roll in the game. Like a big set of credits. Credits, I forgot to mention this. Every single time you go on a mission and you complete a mission, credits roll after you complete that mission. It's really weird and like TV-like. So it's almost like, it's like
an episode?
Yeah, exactly. Like you extract the prisoner and got back to the helicopter and the credits roll. I didn't like it. I don't like that whatsoever. Anyways.
Yeah, that sounds really distracting.
Yeah, it is incredibly distracting. And credits roll before you go into the main missions also, which I didn't like. So instead of being surprised about like the characters that you're going to meet and run into on like this mission, it's like Skullface's name as like Skullface, will be in like the beginning of the credits. So then it's like, going into a mission, at some point in this mission, I'm gonna meet or see or meet again or run into Skullface. And I was like, that's like spoiling the mission before you go into the mission. I hated that aspect of this game.
Yeah.
Anyways, about halfway into this game, Skullface dies, and a big chunk of movie style credits roll, and you get a preview for what is essentially the whole second half, or chapter 2 as it's known, of this game. And chapter 2 gives you a preview of like a lot of the crazy stuff that is going to happen, and it just kind of like makes you want to play more. Like you almost feel like, holy crap, this whole arc with Skullface, which began in Ground Zeroes, has been wrapped up, and yet all of these other storyline threads with all of these buddies and these new people and Quiet and these other companions and people that you've met along this journey up to Skullface, it's like all this other stuff still has to get resolved somehow. And it's kind of cool knowing that even though this big chunk of the storyline has been resolved, that there's a bunch of chaos like that's that's about to ensue. And I kind of appreciated like the whole preview thing, because without it I would have been like, oh, this is weird. Like like I've been watching a bunch of like trailers for this game up until this point, and the trailer had a bunch of cutscenes for stuff that I hadn't even seen, like through this whole Skullface saga. It almost would have been like when a movie will come out and you realize that they cut scenes from that movie that were in the trailer originally. Like I heard the Fantastic Four movie recently did that. Like they showed like some scene with like the Thing flying out of a helicopter or something like that, and then I don't know, some scene in like the trailer for the new Fantastic Four movie like was like a really big scene that people were excited for, and then didn't even end up being in the film. It would have been like that,
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole second half of this game is about like, like that virus, like those not a virus, the parasites, like an outbreak actually happening at your base. Actually, for a second time, now that I think of it, like this game does some crazy thing. What I'm trying to say, it creates a sense of emergency, where like before the whole Skullface thing is settled and whatnot, and you're kind of like hot on his trail and learning about the parasites and stuff like that, there's actually an outbreak at your base, but it's not of like the English language, because you're, as you go through the missions in the game, you're abducting soldiers from Afghanistan and Russia, and who knows where like their origins are and stuff like that, because they're like private military soldiers and stuff like that. And so some of the I forget what it is, one of the languages on the base, like there's a parasite outbreak and stuff like that. And so you actually get to this point where you need to resolve that arc in the game, because soldiers who you have brought back to your base are actually dying like, and not coming back. Like there, a lot of the efforts that you've gone through to get some of these people at your base, like it's actually, they end up in the sick bay and then they die.
Do you lose the technology that came with them?
Yeah, like your rank can go down. Like if if too many of your high level combat guys dies, well, you don't lose the technology that you developed, but like. Okay. If your combat rank was at level 48 and too many of your guys die, it'll go down to level 47. And what that affects is like you can send those guys out on random missions in the world. There's a little kind of like a spreadsheet version, like where you're how do I describe this? Like you're given a text-based mission. It says like, we want you to send people to protect this VIP. This mission is like a high-class mission, rank A. And so you're like, well, I'll send these rank B guys there, and they'll have a 75% chance to complete this mission, earn me this much money and resources, and like there's a chance that 15% of them will die. Like it'll lower, like if you go from like a rank 48 combat to a rank 47 combat, it'll lower your chances of success on those other side ops.
That's cool. I mean, it sucks, but it's cool.
Right, and so this game has a whole second chapter, and in the second chapter, you're further finding out about characters that you've met, and there's this whole thing with like Quiet. You have like a big arc with her, kind of getting into her a little bit. One of the things that I found was like interesting was that the people really cried out when her design was first unveiled as being highly sexist, and why she's got to be like, why does she have to be mostly naked, and this and that, and people are kind of like, Kojima's a pig, and he is kind of piggish and all this stuff. Like he sexualizes women to like in extreme in like each one of his games. You know, everything from like butt shots to, you know, cleavage shots to this and that, which is why I thought it was really cool in Metal Gear Solid 3 that he made like the boss, the legendary soldier in this grand series of his, a fully clothed woman, you know, like I thought that was really cool. Almost like his way of being like, see, I'm not as much of a pig as you thought, you know, and I think, you know, women are really important and can be powerful and things like that. But so like him creating this quiet character was like going back to the
going right back to it.
Right. But then it turns out, right, so the parasites that I previously mentioned in this game's storyline, they can be used for all sorts of things besides like destroying people's lungs, you know, from the inside out when they start breeding in your body. They can be used in other sci-fi ways. They have like regenerative purposes. They can they're used on like this XOF elite supernatural unit. They can give guys armor on the outsides of their body and stuff like that. So basically like the sci-fi twist that the series has always been known for, it's present. And you find out that Quiet, she had to undergo some of this like parasite therapy because basically she's almost killed at the beginning of the game. I guess I don't need to spoil that part of it. Her body undergoes like horrible burning and stuff like that. And basically the Skullface character saves her life by basically using her as a test subject for like one of the parasite treatments and stuff like that. And that's why she's able. Have you seen any of the footage of her in the trailer? How she can go cloak? She can like cloak her body and basically make like her body like disappear at where she's not just going like stealth camouflage. She can materialize and dematerialize. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen that.
But then like because of the way the parasites work and stuff like that, and like I said, the sci-fi nature of an otherwise very grounded game, she doesn't really need to eat food, and so she photosynthesizes, and she like when she drinks, she doesn't need to drink through her mouth, and she like actually drinks through her skin and stuff like that. And who knows like how much of that was actually necessary versus how much it was like Kojima being like, that's why this character is naked, because if she had clothing on, she would suffocate. How would she breathe through her body if she had clothing on, and how would she drink the rain or the shower from the shower of her jail cell that she could totally get out of anytime she wanted to, you know, if she wasn't 3/4 of the way naked. You know, one of the things that I really appreciated was you do get an outfit option for her later on where you can put her in like a military uniform. Like it's kind of cool, you know, because for as much as I'm not opposed, you know, to like certain amounts of TNA and stuff, you know, sometimes it's fun. I watch a lot of anime, which can get kind of pervy and stuff like that, and you know, it's kind of, I'll just say, you know, you know what? No, I'm not gonna go there. I was a little. I'll just say this, like, I wasn't like drooling over her character or anything like that, but I also wasn't one of the people that was offended by it. I was just like, oh, an attractive woman companion, with large breasts that are held back by a tiny bikini. I was like, all right, cool. I'll take you on missions sometimes. You have good sniping capabilities. You know, I still, when I had the ability to put clothes on her, I did, you know, and I didn't care about like, is she suffocating or not? I was like, I can finally play this game and just not feel like a pervert, you know?
Right.
All right,
people walking by like, hey, so who are you bringing on your mission there, Matt?
Right.
Or do you really need a BDSM stripper?
There were a couple of times where like Gina would watch me, you know, like play the game, and she was never like offended by it or thought it was weird that like I was playing a game with like this half, you know, naked woman or anything like that, which I thought was cool. But like I don't know, just I felt better when I could put clothes on her. But so there's a whole story arc that goes through this whole entire game. Unlike you know, Dee Dee, your dog, he doesn't have like a story arc. You find him and he grows up and you go on missions with him. Quiet, there is a whole massive story arc that takes place through the whole entire game. And it's really, really good. It's really, really badass. It's one of my favorite parts of the game. Is figuring out who she is and what she is and what her relationship with Big Boss is and is going to be. I mean, she gets tortured throughout the storyline of this game as some of the people at the base, you know, are trying to figure out what her agenda is. The troops don't like her and all sorts of stuff. And essentially, after a really, really incredible scene, which I don't feel the need to go in depth about,
Okay.
She leaves. Oh, you know what? I should actually talk about this if we're going to go full-on spoilers. Okay. You ready for this, Scott? So Skullface is dying, right?
Mhm.
Skullface is dying, and one of the things you find out right before he dies is that he had 3 versions of the English strain of the parasite virus in existence. We acquired 2 of them, and I needed to know where the third one was. And the third one, he says something along the lines of, it's closer than you think. Or he said like it's close to your heart or something like that. It was very kind of cryptic and weird. And you find out that basically Quiet's first mission in this game was to get abducted, get captured by Boss, which she did, and that she was supposed to go back to Mother Base, and that she was supposed to essentially unleash the English version of the parasites, basically infecting all the soldiers there and Big Boss himself, and that her goal was to go there and wipe out your base. Which is crazy. Huge plot twist. So the reason why Quiet is known as Quiet, I don't know if that's a name she gave herself or whatever, but she doesn't speak in the whole entire game up until the very end, because basically through all the torture and stuff like that, she never speaks once because for one reason or another, and they're a little bit, they don't really flat out say why she chose not to. I personally think that she like literally fell in love with the legend of this soldier that is Big Boss. I just think that thing that's charismatic as hell about him and lets him, recruit soldiers and have them join his cause and all these guys follow him, all that everything that is the legendary soldier that everybody else has fallen in love with throughout the years, both fans and in the actual canon of the storyline, it
Right.
struck her. And she basically chooses not to destroy us. Later on in the game, you find out that the virus actually, or the parasites rather, I keep saying virus, that it mutates for one reason or another, and she's not entirely sure if it's going to mutate inside her and if it actually is going to infect the soldiers and stuff like that. And this just doesn't happen like by the snap of a finger. There is like I said, towards the end of this very long story arc, she essentially leaves. She leaves your base, she leaves you, and she leaves you a cassette tape behind that basically explains that because the virus is mutated.
Nothing but poop sounds.
Nothing but poop sounds and Quiet's goodbye. Yeah. She says she doesn't know what's going to happen and she can't risk taking everybody out, so she has to go. And Scott, she goes, and when I mean she leaves. I didn't know this. I am down a buddy.
Oh, you just lose a buddy.
Her amazing sniperness, which is like this, it becomes this incredible buddy gameplay feature thing. I personally, I take D-Dog with me in most of my missions. Like being able to see enemies through walls becomes invaluable. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun running around with the dog also. It's just panting heavily while you're running through the desert with him. But she goes, and people have figured out online that there are certain things you can do with like some sort of like an emblem system in the game that you can wear that basically prevents the game from triggering a mission before the mission you're going to go on where she leaves. You can postpone it. I guess you can't get 100% completion of the game until you go forth, obviously, like with the mission where she has to leave and stuff like that. But I didn't know about any of that. And now she's gone. And I'm down a sniper scout. It's really weird. But here's the thing, right? There's that part of me that could be pissed off. That's like, holy crap. Like one of the, not like a major pillar, but one of like the minor pillars of this game's gameplay offering was like this cool sniper that you can do all this stuff with. And, it was like badass. And like, it's almost like that's been ripped away from me without me knowing that it was going to happen. But at the same time, I really, really appreciate how bold Kojima was with wanting to tell the story of this character entering the game, From a canon perspective, potentially falling in love with the main character. I thought that she was like I really liked her personality. I really liked everything that she ended up being about and what she stood for and the things that had happened to her and everything that I learned about her. I was just like, wow, what a, despite the breasts hanging out everywhere, what a great addition to the Metal Gear saga. And the fact that he
Then she just disappears.
Yeah, he wanted to complete her arc like that, and that was going to affect your gameplay, and that you weren't just going to develop, like. In other words, there's nothing that I have found in the game or that I have heard anybody else discover that puts another sniper with her capabilities on your team. It's freaking incredible. Like
Nice.
That she is just gone. Like I cannot believe it. It is so bold.
Yeah.
That my mind is blown that he had the gall to do that to players, And I can see how some people would be totally pissed off about it, but I personally really appreciate it.
It's like a George R. Martin move.
It is. It
take
really,
a major
really,
character
really
and
is.
remove them.
Yeah, and the storyline segment, the cutscene and gameplay segment that you go through with her, that puts her to that point where she leaves, like that whole, we'll say, hour of the game, is really emotional and really impactful. And I thought it was some really great storytelling. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm gonna cough here. Because we gotta wrap this up soon. Anyways, the game gets a little bit clunky towards the end, towards the latter half of the game's second chapter. It starts doing this thing where instead of moving forward, it begins moving backwards. And before the game story ends, it starts doing this thing where, let's say, I'm just going to throw numbers out there. Let's say mission 56 was a story mission, where you're continuing along with all these things that were hinted at in the chapter 2 preview and stuff like that, and the canon's moving forward and stuff like that. So that's mission 56 is canon, it's moving forward. Mission 57, like I said, for example, is suddenly a harder version of a previous mission you've already gone on. It might be a harder version of mission number 5, where the enemies are on extreme difficulty, or you might be doing the subsistence, quote unquote, version of this mission where you don't get to go into the mission with a loadout. You're dropped where the game wants to drop you, and you have to acquire all of your weapons and your gadgets on site, whether it's sneaking in stealthy and retrieving your rifle, because because you made an enemy soldier drop it, or you found whatever. You find all your weapons, gadgets.
Random limitations or difficulties in front of you.
Right. And I like that.
The mission's already done.
And I think it's really fun. But I think it's when you start seeing that stuff that you start seeing where Kojima Productions and Konami started butting heads. And I don't know if it was budgetary problems or time constraints. I'd assume it was time constraints. I feel like you start seeing some of that, because instead of seeing what is up until this point like one of the most masterfully told open world game stories that I've ever experienced, you start seeing kind of like some of the seams start coming apart, and you start seeing where they started like stitching things together, and it almost feels like padding. And I really, really wish that padding wasn't in there, because, okay, so here's a weird thing, right? After you get to some of these padding missions, you still get to missions after them where you're continuing the canon and you're moving the game's story forward and stuff like that. And so I really, really don't understand why they didn't just put those padding missions after everything.
Yeah.
You suddenly get to a mission in this game called The Truth. And I believe you only get to the truth after you do all of the other story missions in the game. And all the other story missions of the game are highlighted in yellow. Like I said, you always know when you're going into a canon progressing mission.
Cool.
And when you go on the truth mission, essentially what happens is you play the very first mission of the game all over again. And what you discover, and I kind of feel bad like spoiling this here, because like if you ever end up playing the game, this is like a huge thing, Scott. Okay, so what you discover? Are you filing your nails? What was that noise?
Oh no, sorry, I was just dusting off my keyboard because I dropped
Oh,
a
okay,
bunch of
it's a funny
stuff
noise.
on it.
All right, so
I've been like scratching my head and digging out
oh,
my
okay,
keyboard.
yeah. So the game up until this point has you believing that you're playing as the legendary soldier, Big Boss, who has just woken up after his 9-month long coma and is building his base, and that all this base building is going to eventually lead into Metal Gear 1, which originally came out on the MSX in 1987. What the Truth episode reveals to you is that in one of the cutscenes earlier on in the game, or well, basically at the end of Ground Zeroes, and sort of in the beginning of the Phantom Pain, there's 3 people in the hospital bed in the end of Ground Zero / the beginning of the Phantom Pain. You have Kaz Harai Miller, who loses an arm and a leg in the explosion on the helicopter. You have Big Boss, who you play as in Ground Zeroes, who almost takes the brunt of an explosion to the face and body. And you have the third character, who Kojima was very sneaky about hiding in the helicopter, who he was sneaky about hiding in the hospital room. And this third character is actually the medic who was on the helicopter. The medic takes the blast to the face. And you see it. Once you go back and you watch all the footage from Ground Zeroes, the beginning of Phantom Pain, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this. But at the same time, you don't really play as Big Boss Theory and Big Boss and, the real Big Boss is not the real Big Boss and blah, 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 was actually one of the fan theories that came from people watching this footage in slow motion. So here's what really happens. In the Truth episode, it's revealed that the real Big Boss, who doesn't take nearly as much damage to the face as the medic, he wakes up a little bit earlier from a coma. He's also put into a coma from the explosion and stuff like that, but he wakes up before the 9-month period of the other guy. And so he wakes up and he's got all of his other, Kaz, who is like a military advisor and a really good friend, and some other people are telling him, the world wants you dead. The world wants you dead for, keeping nuclear weapons at this base that was destroyed, and you've got all sorts of enemies and all sorts of governments around the world and stuff like that. And the best thing that we could possibly do for you right now is make everybody think that, well, no, I was going to say make everybody think that you're dead. That's not what they did. The best thing that we could do right here is take this medic guy who's received an incredible amount of damage to his face. He like metal and bone fragments and everything. Like, he, for all intents and purposes, should not have survived the explosion, but he did. We should take all the technology that we have right now, and plastic surgery and all this other crazy crap, and we should make him look like you. We should essentially take the opportunity to create a body double. And that's what they do. And they create a body double of Big Boss, and they go through all of these like procedures of, I don't know, like some of it's like hypnosis and like all this other stuff that the Metal Gear Solid has always been known for. And they essentially make this body double for all intents and purposes. They give him mentally, they give him the history of Big Boss and all the missions that he's ever been on and everything that he ever knows. And it's this whole long, elaborate process that they're doing subliminally while he's in the coma for the 9 months and this and that. And so that when he wakes up, he thinks and he believes that he's Big Boss. And meanwhile, so he wakes up. And when he wakes up, the player character, you think that you're Big Boss, but really this whole thing is orchestrated by the real Big Boss, who's off doing whatever it is that Big Boss really does. He's really building, like his own base elsewhere in the world while you're building this mother base and stuff like that. But everybody's in on it. So all of your advisors and all the other characters throughout this game who are, giving you advice on missions and, suggestions for the ways to tackle problems and things like that, they know. And they're leading you on. And then so at the end of this Truth episode, not only what they do is they reveal the truth of the matter and stuff like that. Because they do this cool thing at the beginning of the game when you wake up in the hospital. One of the surgeons is talking to you and stuff like that, and he tells you like, oh, we've got to hide your identity. And so in order to hide your identity, you know, we're going to do plastic surgery on you here in a minute, and like, what do you want to look like? And so you essentially create a character face like right then and there. You can make them look like whatever you want, and you can name them whatever you want, which is really weird that after you go through this character creation process, that you just end up looking like Big Boss. Like, I never understood why. And then like later on, the game does this cool thing where he looks at like the real picture of like all of the characters in the game standing outside like a helicopter, kind of like a fun buddy military picture. And then you see, you know, like Kaz and Ocelot and Big Boss, and then finally they show you the medic character to the right of Big Boss, and it's the character with the face that you created in the character creation tutorial. Oh man, it's so cool, Scott.
That's really cool.
I love it. Yeah, and it's like that moment where you're like, oh my god, not only this, right, but you then realize that while you're getting out of the hospital, there's two characters in there. There's you and your body that's like limp because you just woke up out of like a nine-year-long coma. It's you with like all sorts of adrenaline shot in your body, and you walk out of there with the masked character, the character from the original trailer, you know, that we talked at like back during the Moby Dick studio days and stuff like that, with his face completely bandaged, who you can't see and stuff like that. And that's the real Snake. Like, again, kind of like in Metal Gear Solid 2, that's, I mean, the real Big Boss guiding you out of this hospital, making sure you survive the assault on it so that you can go and carry out his name. Like, so it's like, once again, like the legendary soldier is seeing everything through and seeing that you survive. But during this truth chapter, I forget if I don't think you uncover a tape, like once again another cassette tape, or if one of the characters in the games gives you the cassette tape. I forget how it happens. You receive a tape from the real Big Boss, basically telling you everything that they did, all of the plans and the backstory and why they did it, and why it's important for you to carry on his name, you know, and that like he's really, really thankful for you to go on and carry his name and give him the opportunity to go do these other things here. You know, and they're letting you know that you're not who you thought you were, but the weight of like the name that you carry is incredibly, incredibly important in the canon of this, you know, of this game, and like the covertness of basically this big ruse that he played and stuff like that. And so I thought it was genius, Scott. I thought it was like I couldn't believe it. Like, in this way, like Kojima's done this thing where everybody who's playing this game is their own version of the legendary Big Boss, but none of us are him. He still exists in Kojima's canon, doing whatever it is that Big Boss is really doing in the Metal Gear universe, you know, like he still is very much this thing that like is Kojima's, where you are your own version of him. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of like this weird psychological thing that Kojima ends up making you do. And some people saw it coming, and some people like me, despite watching all of like the theory analysis videos and stuff like that, didn't see it coming. And I really, really loved it. I really, really loved what he created and what he did, and you know the extent. Like Kojima spent the past like 4 years telling this little white lie that both is and isn't a white lie. It's a white lie. It's not like a really heavy lie, but
right.
But then there's people out there, and like I said, you know, like I listen to podcasts about this, you know, like postmortems on this game and stuff like that. I guess there's some people out there, some fans, who are kind of pissed off because they feel like they were led to believe that this game was gonna tell the story of the actual Big Boss and the events leading up to Metal Gear 1 on the MSX. And they're angry that the real Big Boss is out there doing covert real Big Boss things, and that you're essentially playing as not a clone but a body double.
Right.
You know? But here's the thing. Here's the brilliance in what Kojima did. Okay, so remember when I said Metal Gear 1 on the MSX and Metal Gear 2 on the MSX didn't make a lot of sense to people because from fans' perspectives at the time, it didn't make sense that this character named Big Boss was sending Solid Snake to go kill the leader of this, renegade private militia named Big Boss. It didn't make sense that Big Boss was sending Solid Snake, his son, his clone, to go kill himself. When really, this kind of blows my mind. You find out now that in Metal Gear 1, for whatever reason, and we don't know the answer to these reasons, I think it's because eventually the character that you play as in the Metal Gear Solid will have, you'll probably gain like too much nuclear power or whatever it is, because you get to the point in Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, where you can choose to like develop nuclear weapons and stuff like that. I don't know if you can launch them or what that looks like in the game. That's actually in my 90 hours. I haven't got to test that out yet. But okay, so in Metal Gear 1 on the MSX, the real Big Boss, who you are the body double of, is essentially sending Solid Snake to go kill the body double.
Right.
Like, and so you discover, like, when you think about the history and the timeline of this game, you're like, oh my God. Solid Snake, who makes it through all of the events of like Metal Gear 1 and 2 and Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2 on the PlayStation 2 and eventually Metal Gear Solid 4 on the PlayStation 3, is the soldier who in the timeline of this game will essentially kill your player character, and there's nothing you can do about that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
That is insane. And like I said, there's some people who are really, really pissed off about this, but then you've got people like me who are like, there's nothing else like this experience. Like if you've been on this crazy Kojima ride from, day one or the PlayStation days or whenever it was that you decided to jump on his insane storytelling train, the payoff, like in my case, is just like the mind-blowingly awesome, love it thing ever, or I guess, or maybe you're angry because Kojima lied to you. So, I guess, Scott, I mean, we're running long. You probably have 50 million questions, which we will give you the opportunity to ask.
Gosh, I wouldn't even know where to start.
but ultimately, what I'm saying here, what people should know, especially if they decided to listen to all of this and like not knowing anything about the Metal Gear games, maybe they're just listening to it because it's entertaining to listen to us talk and rant and mumble. This game is an excellent stealth action game from like a sandboxy gameplay perspective. It's really, really fun extracting enemies, getting them on your base, watching all of these systems level up and evolve, and weapons get more powerful and changing camo, and like the game part of this game is awesome. Could it be better in certain areas? Yes. Could it be a little bit more Just Cause? Yes. Could it be a little bit more Far Cry 3 in all of the improvements that they made to Far Cry 3 over the years? More base patrols and certain like more things to do in the sandbox in between outposts and stuff like that. Yes, but what's there is incredibly fun to play with. It's incredibly detailed. The level of detail is of a scale that you kind of just need to experience for yourself. Whether it's the environments themselves or how fantastic the AI responds to all of the things that you decide to try out and do within the world. So as a stealth action game, it deserves to be played. Whether you give a shit about all of this storyline stuff or not. Because
the gameplay itself is solid.
And at its heart, this is a tale of revenge. This is, as far as the main character of the story is concerned, for 99% of this game, this is a story of a man who lost everything, including literally limbs, you know, a limb, you know, has bone hanging out of his face, you know, and had to, you know, get surgery and stuff like that to cover up all this. He had scars all over his face and all this stuff. It's a man who had everything taken by him and was willing to go through, you know, whatever it took, you know, kidnapping soldiers and, you know, and doing all this other stuff to build up his power to where it once was, so that he could extract revenge, you know, on the person who, you know, took everything from him. And that story is totally there. That revenge tale is totally intact. Whether or not you like that it goes into the area of, like, you know, parasites, you know, essentially organic nanomachines and all sorts of like crazy crap is, you know, it's love or hate it, take it or leave it. I personally wasn't really a big fan of it. But like all of that's there also, you know, for people who just want this basic tale of revenge, it's there, you know, which is why it's hard not to just flat out recommend the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it's a game that you can, it's multifaceted enough where you know, a great number of people can find something that they like about it enough to keep playing.
Exactly. It's a game for people who have never played a Metal Gear Solid game, and I feel like more than anything, it's a game that was made for fans of the Metal Gear Solid series. You know what I mean?
Cool.
It succeeds on both levels.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
would you say this is your favorite Metal Gear game?
oh man. That's a really hard question for me to answer, mostly because I've got such deep ties to Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation. You know, and like the Twin Snakes remake and stuff like that is really great too. That to me, it comes down between Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PlayStation versus this game. I mean, this game's gameplay, hands down, is you know, the best the series has ever seen, without a doubt. Gameplay-wise, this game eclipses everything else Kojima's ever attempted to do with the series. It's just that the first PlayStation game is so iconic in terms of, like, you know, the boss battles and the storyline. It also tells a really great self-contained story. Like, Metal Gear Solid 5's story as a self-contained story, as a self-contained tale of revenge, I feel like is nowhere near the self-contained story that was told in Metal Gear Solid 1. And so for those reasons, I right now I've just got to tie. I've got to tie them, you know. I like them both the same, but kind of for like the opposite reasons. Where I love Metal Gear Solid 1's storyline and Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain's gameplay.
Nice.
That's it. And I won't drone out about this anymore. That's it. You know what? The more I play Phantom Pain, or maybe I need to go play Metal Gear Solid 1 again or something like that, because, like I said, the way the story came full circle, to me, it's like it's creative genius, you know? So, in those regards, I do really, really like the Phantom Pain storyline. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Time will tell. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. Well, we'll give it another 5 years and see where we're at.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. How does I was going to ask for you, like, how does, I know you're saying, like, you don't even know where to begin with, like, a lot of the questions and stuff like that, and, you know, I fumbled my way through the game's history and stuff like that, but as somebody who appreciates both the video game medium and film and books and just, like, great storytelling in general, like, how does the things that I've described to you, like, how do they sound? What does it make you feel? Does it make you want to play it? Does it make you want to read up on it? Like, what, you know, where does it put you?
Yeah, at the moment it's reminding me of the Paranormal Activity series.
Oh, interesting.
Have you seen those movies? And I'm only going to talk. I'm only talking about the first 4, because I think there's like a pseudo 5th and maybe even a pseudo 6th. I don't remember. The movies themselves have bits and pieces of brilliance in them. You know, the first movie had that static camera setup, which was a great idea. And when stuff got scary in that movie, it was legitimately scary. But, you know, it took forever for that to happen. There's a lot of boring conversation in between. like overall the experience was kind of eh. And each one of the movies is kind of the same, but they change the gimmick each time. The first time it's the camera. The second time it's like it's a camera that the guy bought. The second one it's like a baby camera or something, like a house security camera. And then the third time it's a video camera that he sets up on an oscillating fan, and so the camera pans back and forth. And so of course, what happens is the camera shows one portion of the room, nothing there, turns away, comes back, and there's something there, right?
Yeah.
And it plays with that pretty brilliantly. And then the fourth one, it's a webcam. So they just put a little turn of the screw regarding the gimmick each time, and it's inventive and it's fun in that respect, and they get decent scares out of it. But what's really fascinating about the Paranormal Activity movies is the mythology behind it, and the story of these sisters who are continually haunted throughout the course of their lives, and the way it affects their families over the course of their lives. And so if you decide to sit down and go to Wikipedia and read about the story behind Paranormal Activity, it's pretty cool. And I'm getting the same feeling from Metal Gear Solid. Like, I'm not going to go back and play 11 games.
Right.
But I am really interested to see this bizarre, multi-threaded, self-referencing, retconning,
fourth wall breaking
epic that Kojima has been weaving over the past 30 years. I'm particularly interested in, you mentioned the language thing, and as well nuclear power, and it's maybe an easy comparison, but I just can't help but think about the nuclear bombs at the end of World War II, and the way, like, Japan had a massive emotional reaction to those, and of course they should. But we got the Godzilla series out of it, and there are a number of Japanese, there's a considerable amount of Japanese art that directly or indirectly deals with that, the fallout of those bombs. And you mentioned that they're treating English as though it's a virus, or because it's a parasite or whatever. And what happened after World War II is, after those bombs, we sent troops over there, and they came in. And here's the thing that I found out. Previous to our then occupation of parts of Japan post World War II, a lot of Japanese cities didn't have names on their streets. They had this weird other form of address management that didn't make any sense to the Americans. So when the American soldiers showed up, they came and put street names on all the streets.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so if we're talking about English spreading like a parasite, I was told that when the American soldiers left, the Japanese went and tore all those signs back down because they didn't like them. So I'm wondering how much of this story is inspired by post World War II I'm wondering how much of the story is a post World War II reaction, in a really elaborate, detached sense. But I would need to read up more on the story itself and where Kojima's perspective lies and things like that. But it's very interesting to think about.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, I have always suspected that, like, I don't know how I word this. I don't know, that I guess like a part of Kojima for some reason always felt a certain level, and that level I don't know like how deep it is, but just like a certain amount of like disdain for like the West and maybe America in particular. And when I was playing this game, and like I said, this game, despite the sci-fi, the parasites and causing armor and dematerialization of like Quiet's body, and like despite the goofy sci-fi-ness of this game, it is the most serious Metal Gear game that he's ever made. And more than ever while playing this game, like I got that vibe, kind of like you're saying, like the whole thing with like language and everything, that he was just kind of not being as subtle as he used to be. And then especially, as I kind of mentioned earlier, when you meet the character's name is Code Talker, and he's a Native American tribe, or he's of Native American descent, and I forget his tribe's name and stuff like that. And he basically goes along with the whole plot of like, researching the parasites and this and that, because it's like the threat of the rest of his tribe being wiped out and stuff like that. It's just the fact that like Kojima chose a Native American character for that like vital role of like developing the parasites and stuff like that in this game. I felt like it was another one of those things that wasn't so subtle, of like, like I'm sitting there playing it and like can't help but be like, oh yeah, remember when like our ancestors like came here and we like stole these lands in language and stuff like that, and everything from like all those people and stuff like that. It can't be a coincidence that he makes these decisions and whatnot. It's just it's deep. You're right in that, like, I would not be surprised if every element of this game, and probably the series to a certain extent, goes incredibly deep in those kinds of ways. Like even when the game's not being preachy, like that's the thing with this series is like Metal Gear Solid 1 is kind of like heavy-handed in the way that that it chose to talk about like nuclear war and stuff like that, and it was definitely very, very preachy. And Metal Gear was like 2 and weird and stuff like that, and he like Kojima fluctuates between different levels of subtlety and different levels of like in your faceness, Same thing with this game, all wrapped up in one. Some elements are subtle, some elements not so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, we wrote at the end of this outline. From here, we can go into spoiler territory if we want. Final thoughts / open discussion. And I feel like we definitely have this one. And we hit we're approaching the 3-hour mark on this, aren't we? We always do. It's an extravaganza officially that will be on the title.
It's a full Metal Gear Solid.
Yes. Oh man, what any last thoughts or like closing comments that you have? I feel I've talked for like 2.5 out of these 3 hours, maybe more.
No, I'm just soaking it in now. I feel like the thought that I've been developing was the one that I just gave.
Yeah. Like it's if not worth, well, that it's definitely a series that's worth reading up on and researching at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably will.
Like I said, I feel like I never took a college course where. Actually, I did. I took a college course, but it was like specifically like a postmodernism and science fiction course, and I was able to give a presentation on some of the technology of Mass Effect and whatnot. But I was going to say I've never took one of those courses that I hear about that is specifically about a video game. But I feel like the Metal Gear Solid series is one of those courses that you could teach an entire class on, and that class could be about. Like being an auteur and like authorship and things like that. It can be about, like war economies and government conspiracies. It can be about, video games as a medium and, and the creation process and stuff like that. And like you're saying, it can be about drawing parallels between, Kojima as a writer, director, and, like post-war parallels, as they appear in real life in the game. Everything from, like you were saying, World War II. This series, takes place during and after, the Cold War, and references that material a lot.
Yeah.
And it does this really, really fantastic thing where it throws in just enough real history with its own history. It mixes real history with its own history to create this really fantastic alternate history for the world, Russia, America, and just like in everywhere. And I don't know, it's a great ship to sail on most of the time.
Yeah, it has a wide breadth.
Yeah, it really does. as part of these closing thoughts, I guess the thing that I'm really curious about now, kind of like, you know, the upset crowd is saying the real Big Boss has been off doing who knows what, building his own base. Here's the weird thing, right? So that real Big Boss who sends Solid Snake to kill the body double,
Of
real Big
himself.
Boss, he gets, like, quote unquote taken out by Solid Snake in the official canon second game on the MSX. And I'm not sure, because I'm not that familiar with that game. I'm not sure if we're led to believe that Solid Snake kills Big Boss or what happens, but Big Boss does eventually show up as an old man in the end of Metal Gear Solid 4. And the two of them get to talk again at the very end of that game. At the end of Metal Gear Solid 4, Scott, like I said, Solid Snake is old. He's aging at a rapid age because, you know, he's just like a genetically created clone soldier and stuff like that. And so his body's all weird and he's got gray hair. And he's seen so much stuff on the battlefield that one of the most powerful moments in that game is where he is standing in front of the grave of Big Boss with a gun in his mouth, about to pull the trigger, and Big Boss comes and puts a hand on his shoulder, like stops him from doing it. Man, this series is insane. I love it so much. I love it so much. I do. And like I said, despite like all this knowledge about it, and you know, this fandom that I have for it, I still only consider myself to be on this maybe like slightly above average of like fan of it. There's people who would dance circles around me when it comes to their knowledge about all this stuff, and I love that Kojima over the years has created a series that, like, you know, that really deep conversations can take place about because of, I don't know, just because he has approached the medium the way he has.
Yeah.
And he has made games, you know, in this very way that he has chosen to make games over the years.
Are there any prominent rumors for the next game?
No, because with the what I will call the demise of Konami, you know, here's so weird about Konami is all the bad press that they've been getting lately, and then they go and they release Metal Gear and it's receiving like 9s and 10s across the board. You know, for Phantom Pain, they just released, I forget what it's called. It's like their PES soccer game just had a massive comeback over FIFA, where everybody's saying that it might have finally dethroned FIFA after a really long time, and it's getting really good reviews and stuff like that. But it's like Konami's not interested in the game industry anymore, and there's talk of Kojima, you know, just finally quitting his position there. And he said, like, for the past 3 or 4 Metal Gear games, that it was going to be his last game. But should he ever want to do this and ever want to do like a canon game for this arc, he does still have that real story of whatever Big Boss is doing, you know, achieving in parallel with the character that you're actually playing as in the Phantom Pain. And he could tell that story one day. But I think if he just leaves it alone from here, I think something about it will just be really, really bittersweet and really, really perfect. Like, I think that the bittersweet endings to stories are often my favorite, and I think that's what he's achieved with this one.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I think he shouldn't touch it. There's no rumors of him touching it anymore or doing anything with it more. Like that Metal Gear Rising Revengeance game that came out a couple years ago on PlayStation 3 and 360. The one that you play as the cyborg ninja Raiden, and you can, like, Platinum Games made it. They made the Bayonetta series and Vanquish and stuff like that. I guess that game has already been said. Like, that's not canon. So when the next canon game will come out, who knows? Like, I don't know that anybody can write a game and call it canon without it being Kojima, because I just don't think anybody will care or believe, you know.
Yeah. Or, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Kojima does from here and where Konami goes and what they decide to do with the series. So that's that. That's our podcast extravaganza. Do you have any final thoughts? Final thoughts? I think I'm really done talking.
No, I think I'm good.
We hit like a solid 3 hours right here anyways. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Then we'll hang up here. and then I'll chat with you for a minute or so more about other housekeeping tasks and stuff like that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, for 30andnerdy.com, I'm Matt.
I'm Scott.
And this has been a Metal Gear Solid 5 podcast extravaganza. By the way, PPS, if you go to our 30 and Nerdy Etsy shop, we have a Metal Gear Solid pin back button set on there. If you like collecting pins, we got some cool pins. You get a bonus pin when you buy the set also. So whatever you see there, all the awesome Metal Gear Solid pins, they come with the bonus pin. I figured I'd plug that. I forgot that like we sell this thing in our Etsy shop that totally has to do with what, like with what this podcast is about. But like whatever.
So yeah, if anybody makes it through the 3 hours, they can
exactly. This is like I should record a commercial for us and like splice it somewhere in the beginning. But you know what? I'm not going to be that cheap about it. So there it is. In the end, okay. If you and we say this every single time, if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, concerns, or you just want to praise the hell out of talking about this for 3 hours straight, definitely shoot us a message on Facebook or in the comment section, on like YouTube, or you can go on the website. You could do it there. Everything's
anywhere
online.
You find us.
Yeah, I think if you Google 30 Nerdy, I don't even know if we come up, but if we don't, it's like facebook.com/30 Nerdy, 30andnerdy.com. And then we've got Twitter @30andnerdy, spelled out. Scott, where are you on Twitter? Did you say?
I'm at SW Hannon as always.
All right. There you go. That's everything. Anything else?
That's about it.
All right. Snake!